Sleepy Hollow Fire Protection District meeting. I am your chairman, Frank Berto. This is Tom Finn, Rich Shortall. We have a very supportive three-man board for which I'm very grateful. At this point, I'd like to turn the meeting over to Mr. Finn, who has some things to say.
Thank you, Frank. Just before we get started, let's talk about some ground rules. They'll be virtually identical to the April 6th meeting. You'll see shortly what the agenda includes, and that will be our roadmap to the meeting. Everyone will have their chance to speak, perhaps multiple times, but we're going to do it as follows. There'll be a public comment period that follows as soon as I finish speaking. That's for people to talk on topics that are not on the agenda. Since the agenda has to do with the project, what you are allowed to speak about can be anything other than the project. Your comments about the project will follow later in the meeting after we've had a chance to make our presentation. Based upon the media that has followed the story, including the Community Media Center of Marin that's here filming today, let's all try to keep our comments relevant and respectful of one another. So if you're feeling festive or restive or visceral or cerebral, just be respectful towards your neighbors. We will, during the comment periods, give everybody a chance to comment once before we go around for a second time, all right? If you would just silence your electronic devices, since we're being filmed for television purposes, I'd appreciate that. And then I think the time has come, Rich, to open the floor to public comment on any items not on the agenda. Anyone who wishes to make a statement on something not on the agenda? Seeing none, let's move on to item 3. Somebody's, sorry?
No. I was just indicating.
Hello, Bob.
I thought you were bidding.
No. I don't have the sign.
Let's next move on to item 3, which is board announcements, updates, future agenda items. And I'll lead that off because you may have noticed the last few days quite a lot of smoke in the air around here. And if you didn't know, that has to do with a large fire complex in Mendocino County. The smoke is blowing our way. In fact, there are big fires burning all up and down the state. So many so that a number of our fire department personnel from the Ross Valley Fire Department have been sent out on strike teams to fires up and down the state, including the Bald Fire, the Oregon Gulch Fire, and the Lodge Complex Fire, which is in Oregon. And the Lodge Complex Fire is significant because even our Chief Mills, has been requested to come to that fire. He is qualified as a federal incident commander, and therefore he's a highly sought after expert. So we're not undermanned. People are covering shifts with overtime, but our fire department is being stretched right now. Rich, anything that you'd like to?
No, I think that's it.
All right, and then other updates, agenda items, announcements. Oh, I have one more. The November election is coming up. I believe it's on November 4th or November 2nd. I can't recall. Just to let you know, we've submitted all of the documentation. Thank you, November 4th, County. We've submitted all of our documentation necessary to hold the election with respect to items that concern us. That includes the renewal of the paramedic tax, which we have expressed our support for. That includes the Marin Emergency Radio Authority bond measure, which we've expressed our support for. And we've confirmed the district boundaries for the county as is required. So we're good to go for the election.
Move on to the fire department.
Yes, please, go ahead.
Yeah. Oh, so next one we actually have a guest here whose time is a little bit limited. That's Battalion Chief Jim Hansen from the fire department. I received a call from the fire department recently asking if they could come and give us a briefing and make a request relative to the latest fire flow project that's going on. So Chief Hansen, if you can come on up. Or there, wherever you're comfortable.
For those of you that may not be aware, there's a fire flow project which improves water mains, hydrants, etc. in the residential areas and commercial areas of Marin that's administered by the Marin Fire Chiefs Association. And a lot of those upgrades are identified by each local fire department on a cyclical basis. And in 2010, we updated our plan, which included your neighborhood. And in that plan, upgrades are being completed by that fire flow fund. And we found a gap of just one single stretch that wasn't currently completed in that section. And what we're asking of the fire board is to approve funds needed up to a maximum of $25,000. The project may come in less for one additional hydrant of a stretch on Fawn Drive.
Is there any questions about that from anybody? As everybody probably realizes, we've made this clear a lot of times. Over the years, we've funded hydrant replacements frequently at the request of the fire department. Some hydrant replacement is done as part of the MMWD replacement program. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. But sometimes that's not enough, so we have a request for one more hydrant. If there's no further question, yes?
Yes, please. My name's Gerald Page, and I live at 70 Vaughan, and that's where you're proposing to put the hydrant. The only thing I would like to be sure gets into the records of this plan is the fact that this is immediately adjacent to a very large Ross Valley sanitary access point for their vacuuming and cleaning of the entire system up Fawn and down to Butterfield. It is also a major access for the county crews to go down into the creek because there is a very big culvert there that gets blocked in the heavy, excuse me, heavy creek conditions. And so trees can jam this way across the culvert and block it. So they have to get into the creek. They can't get in on the other side. They have to go into this. So those are important access points to consider. The other problem is that people back into the creek all the time there. So when you had your creek cleanup, I asked them to leave the tree stumps there to block people from backing down that bank. So it's a kind of a problem area with some special circumstances. I would like to have the hydrant go in. We all want more fire flow. I endorse the project. But I would like you to be aware that there are circumstances there that affect other agencies, and I hope they will be fully coordinated in this process. Thank you.
I appreciate that. Before I leave, I'd like to connect with you just to make sure that your concerns are represented with Argonaut, who's going to be the licensed contractor that handles that. Okay.
If I could just say one thing too, the hydrant that we're talking about right now is not that hydrant. They are replacing the fire mains, which are also the domestic water supply. They are either adding or replacing some existing hydrants, which is the one that Daryl's talking about. This is for another hydrant, an additional one, which is actually going to be further up on Fawn. But I'm glad you guys are going to get together to address that area too. Any other questions? If there's not, I'd actually like to make a resolution to support funding of the additional hydrant that's being requested by the fire department.
The only problem, Rich, is that it's not on the agenda.
Okay.
So we're going to have to defer that to a meeting, but it fits right under the heading of future agenda items.
Okay.
We'll do that. Thanks, Jim.
Thank you.
All right, any more updates? Rich, sorry.
We have several of them, so bear with us. Sorry. The next one, which we're really pretty excited about, is we have a new website. This website is a big improvement from the old one. I was looking at the site today, and I see they're in transition, so it actually may be up later today, hopefully Monday at the latest. It is designed by a company called XMR Fire Emergency Service Consulting, so it is specifically designed for the fire service and agencies like ours. So I think you'll find it to be actually graphically much more interesting, much easier to find your way around. It has one feature that I've wanted for the longest time. It's the subscribe feature. You hit the button, enter your information, and from that point forward, anything new that goes on the website, a meeting notice, a minutes, an agenda, a project update, or whatever, is automatically sent to us. So this really streamlines a lot of the issues about how do I get information and so forth. So take advantage of that. Meeting announcements, those news updates on there, documents are easier to locate, it's easier to follow the major projects. There'll be more financial information with audits and so forth eventually posted. And then a lot of fire prevention information and links that are on there. So please take advantage of that. Take a look at it. Bear with us, it'll be another day or two, I think, before it's up, but we're very close. which leads me really to the second part of the update, and I'll just kind of walk around and hand these out real quick as I'm talking here. And this is, if you could pass down the road, this is for a chipper day, and I think everybody's somewhat familiar with the concept. This is a letter which is going to go to all the residents in the fire district. I believe it's going to be sent out on Monday. Not only will you get this letter, but in much glossier, really much cooler format, a tremendous fire prevention brochure that has been customized for Sleepy Hollow comes along with it. It's the best one I've ever seen by far. And it has a lot of information down in there about defensible space that's understandable, about making changes in the landscaping that you do, and what they call hardscaping, and on and on and on. It's a great document, great pictures, some pictures of Sleepy Hollow in there, very customized what we're doing here, and that goes along with it. And the goal of all of that is that when you get your letter, okay, chipper day, what's that all about? Well, basically, most chipper days involve people having to remove vegetation from their property, put it in a truck, and drive it to a remote site to be chipped. That's what they do in most of the Ross Valley. What we're proposing is a little bit different. What we want you to do is read information about how to effectively make your home safe, defensible space, and all that. Take the steps necessary for that, and then all you need to do is stack the material in front of your home, and it will be picked up and chipped on the spot. We're going to have John Hanley's here. He'll talk to you a little bit later about some other things, but John Hanley sponsors and leads a group called Youth to Work, which are youth from Marin County, many of them from Sleepy Hollow. They'll be the ones who actually pick the stuff up and shove it in the chipper. Most of you know that there's a tree service company called Small World, which keeps their stuff down there at San Domenico. They're going to provide the truck and chipper for the program. And basically what you're going to do is, if you're interested in it, you go to our website. You sign up through the website. It's very simple, so we know what your address is. And then John and his crew will come by on Sunday morning, August 24th, pick the stuff up, chip it, and it goes to the Marin Recycling Center and off to the cogeneration plant for reburning and all this. So it's a pretty exciting composting. And some of it goes to the, 100% composting.
So they claim.
Anyway, going to recycle. So I think it's a good program. I think it's worth taking advantage of. And really, this is the first year of this. We may even do it one more time this year when the creek cleanup day comes. We didn't want to advertise both dates initially because we weren't sure, but this is getting started, and in future years there'll be more of this, and I think it's a very good program. And I do want to thank a lot of people who helped on this. Todd Lando, who's from what they call Fire Safe Marin, is actually giving us a grant, $1,500 to help fund the program. His group also helped design the website. Katie Rice, our supervisor, was very involved in planning for this and very supportive. John Hanley and Youth to Work, Small World Tree Service, and then the Homeowners Association is at their meeting the other night. We briefed on this, and they're going to do their best to get the word out too. So if you're not part of all that, get the word out. You got the letter, take advantage of the program. Go to the website, sign up. Any questions? Okay.
Other announcements?
So I would like to, one of the things that's been an important topic is fire road maintenance. And a big project was just completed this week by John Hanley's group. So John, if you wouldn't mind just kind of giving us an update on the San Domenico Fire Road Repair Project.
Hi, my name is John Hanley, and I'm a retired firefighter from San Francisco, and I started this Youth to Work. That's our kids. And let me start with there's a rumor going around that Marin kids don't like to work. That's false. And let me tell you, that's false. So this is a nonprofit with no overhead, and I don't have any flyers to hand you or anything like that. But we get contracts with the Marin County Parks, the Water District, Triple C Ranch, and we put the kids to work. We're very diversified. We've had a couple girls from Harvard working for us from our community, and then guys who didn't do so well in high school working for us. We've had Drake's basketball team, state championship was working for us, and then, it's wide open. So these are our kids. We're just the same as the Conservation Corps, but it's Marin kids. We've done creek cleanup. So, to the point of the matter is, that fire road, as you next to the horse stables, couldn't get up it. It was impossible. Impossible. Fire engines could not get up it. And when you see those roads, so if they can't get up it, then they can't make a stop on that ridge line. And that's our early warning system. They got to make a stop on the ridge line. And then that's like you see planes up and down the coast, the Strategic Air Command, they go up and down our coast at 4 and 3 in the morning. That's what the firefighters use as their stop point if a fire comes this way, or if it's going that way to protect Lucas Valley. So we couldn't get up there, fire engines couldn't get up there. So what we did is Terry Keats, a construction guy from Sleepy Hollow, we got his tractor and then we got gravel and we paved that road. Some might not think it looks nice and cute, but if you play the fire game, it's a defensible space and we got access. So now fire engines can get up that road, even the engines that come to your house. It doesn't have to be 4-wheel drive. So when a fire hits, you'll have 5 engines shoot up that road and they'll set up a perimeter to keep the fire coming this way if we got an easterly wind. And answer any of your questions. So anyway, our kids' youth to work, we're doing the gravel moving along with the tractor. So it's very successful and you got access.
One added note on that, I do want to thank Connie Berghill for not only calling that issue to our attention, but she worked with John in San Domenico School over there to make sure that everybody was on board and we're all on the same page of this. And then obviously the fire board funded all of that work. So we're very happy to get that.
Is that the fire road that's right opposite the baseball diamond?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, that was really eroded.
Yeah.
There are deep crevices in the bottom
Right.
200 meters of the road
Right.
that made it impassable. John's group, in a single morning and a half, went up and filled the crevices with gravel, tamped it all down. It's easily drivable now by a fire apparatus.
And more walkable.
Yes, too.
Yeah, historical perspective, if you remember about 6-7 years ago, they were having fires in Sleepy Hollow, if you remember, and that road was accessible. And Cal Fire even brought in planes to stop it. But we could get up it then, fire trucks, which was their access point. A week and a half ago, you couldn't get up it if there was a fire there. And then we got headaches. So it's all set now.
Well done.
Okay, and one more thing. One request that has come up with before has been questions about the Pacific Gas and Electric natural gas distribution system and whether or not it's safe. And I said that I was concerned about that and that I plan to meet with PG&E and the fire department to do an investigation of what the status is and so forth. So I did that. In last week, I met with Battalion Chief Dave Saskiowski from our fire department here, and a man named James Wickham, who's in a new division of PG&E, which is called I have to read this, Emergency Preparedness and Public Awareness Division. It was a very productive meeting, went on for several hours, and I have a written report which I'm going to post on the website. I'm not going to read it, and I'm not going to go through excruciating detail, but I will hit the high points of it for you. And if you want to know more, it'll be there, or you can give me a call about it. But basically, in the simplest note, the natural gas system has 2 main ways of distributing gas. One is big pipes called transmission lines, which deliver gas like up to 900 pounds. They're huge pipes, 42-inch and so forth. And then what is basically called the distribution system, which is what we have under our streets here in Sleepy Hollow. I think everybody is aware that the pipe which exploded in San Bruno was one of the big transmission lines. There are no big transmission lines in Sleepy Hollow or near Sleepy Hollow. It's all just lower pressure, 40-50 PSI distribution lines. They are made of both steel and plastic. Most of the main lines that go down the streets out here are maybe 2, 3, 4 inches thick in diameter, and they're mostly made of steel, and coming off of them to each of your houses are lines that are mostly plastic. The reason for the plastic lines is, believe it or not, the new plastic lines are actually better than the old steel lines. They're not subject to corrosion, they're a little bit flexible, and they have a longer duration. Doesn't mean the steel's unsafe. It just means the newer technology favors the installation of those. There is a concern about it. The first generation of plastic pipe that came out was called Hollow A. This was made in the early 70s. That has been shown to be more crack prone than the later generations of that. It doesn't mean that it's a huge hazard. It depends on where it's installed, it depends on how the earth moves in there, it depends on a zillion factors that are out there. But the fact of it is that PG&E has a program to replace that. We do have some of that in Sleepy Hollow. There's about 3,000 feet of it in here. It's mostly on the smaller lines that are the branch lines, and they are replacing that. Another question was, does PG&E have maps that show all this? Yes. We were showing the maps, both hard copies of the maps, and then all the mapping is actually available on computers, and every one of the gas repair trucks and distribution guys and all the rest of that, they all have all the information in their rigs at all times available to them. The maps are surprisingly detailed. I mean, they show where the lines are, they show when they're installed, they show the pressure that they show what they're made out of, so they're quite detailed, and that you should have a lot of confidence that PG does know where all the lines are. Then the question came up about valves. Does it know where the valves are? It does know where the valves are. We saw the maps of the valves, but you have to understand, this gets a little bit technical, so I'll try to make it very brief. The goal of the gas distribution system, much like electrical, is to try to keep people receiving gas all the time so that their houses can stay in service. If you start shutting off valves, obviously people are not going to have gas, and if you shut down a relatively wide area, there's that much more of it. Valves also have another problem. They're much more prone to leaks than the hard pipe. So the way the system is designed, it's a gridded system. That means gas is flowing in different directions to all parts of the system so that it can stay in service even if there's a leak. It is possible for PG&E. They have pre-planned approaches to determining which valves need to be shut off if there's a major leak. We saw that, we were showing how they work, and we were showing them on maps, and they were showing where they were located. They know what they're doing with this. As an example, if you wanted to shut off the gas at Sleepy Hollow, it's fairly complicated. There's actually 7 valves that need to be shut off, and they're not all sitting right next to each other. They're spread around quite a bit, because we have gas coming over the hills, we have gas coming in this way, we have gas coming in that way, so it's a fairly complicated system. But they know where it is, they know what they're doing, they pre-plan for all of this. So what do they do when we have a leak out here? We had 2 leaks here in Sleepy Hollow recently. That's not unusual. In talking with Chief Staskiowski, they get 1 or 2 gas leaks a month. It does happen. And basically the solution is not to turn off 7 valves and shut down Sleepy Hollow to make the repair, because the amount of gas that's coming out is actually relatively small. If the gas is burning, that's actually even better, believe it or not. We used to do this in San Francisco all the time, because that means you're not going to have an accumulation of gas, it's flaring and burning off. What they do is they come in, they know where the pipes are, they have the maps, they dig down relatively quickly, and they clamp the pipe. When the clamp is piped, everybody else stays in service, they fix the leak, they turn the gas back on by removing the clamps, and it's back in service without having to turn off lines to anybody else. It is much faster for them to dig down, clamp the pipe, than it is to turn off valves. One of the problems with valves is when you turn them off, there's still a ton of gas left in the system. And that allows them to bleed down. That could be hours. When they get in, they get down the pipe. It's much quicker than that.
And pilot lights.
Pilot lights is another reason that they don't like to turn off the gas to a large area, because they all go out, they all have to be relit, and they're responsible for that. It's not to say it never happens. If the leak is big enough, it's a big enough problem, they know how to do this, and they'll go back and do that. They'll take responsibility for relighting that. But the method that they're using is not unique to here. This is the method that is applied everywhere in the country. They are following the national standards and protocols for doing this. The fire department is very happy with their service and very happy with their working relationship, and they found that the PG&E people respond very quickly to incidents with all the resources that are needed to handle them. So, as I say, you could read the report, but my opinion about this, everybody knows that PG&E got a black eye and a tarnished image with what happened in San Bruno. It was a horrible, tragic incident. There's still a lot of investigations, other things that are happening around that. We get that. But I will tell you that in my opinion, PG&E has really recommitted itself to safety to try to be the best they can in the country. They have 20,000 employees. Virtually all of them are really dedicated to making it a good, safe system. They want to take pride in it. They set up a new safety division. People are working with the first responders, public safety. And I can tell you, from the position of our local fire department, they could not be happier with the service that they're getting from Pacific Gas and Electric. So, yes.
Once again, Harold Page, on Drive. I met with Dave Stasiowski. He brought the map for the area because we were talking about digging to put the hydrant in. And it was pretty clear that the map didn't really have all the information on the pipes that were in the ground. And he agreed with me. When PG&E opens up the ground, I take pictures of what's down there. So we discussed that, and just a little sidelight, there are still some questions about their maps. I don't, for example, have total faith that we do in fact know what's down there. The other point is that when you have a distribution pipe coming down Butterfield Road and you have a need to pinch that pipe or close off the flow somehow, they have to bring in large equipment on a flatbed truck. This blocks Butterfield. If people are trying to get out of the hollow, which I think we all agree is the best move to do in a major fire, out of here, a flatbed truck with a large digging apparatus is probably not going to be very helpful. So I would only ask that we consider the possibility of how that would be handled in an emergency. And I have not heard that addressed, so you don't have to talk about it now, but I ask that as part of this process, you consider what happens when you have the need to open up a major thoroughfare with people trying to escape. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Chris?
Hi, some of you know that I'm one of the 20,000 employees at PG&E. I've worked for them for 26 years, and Gary will be happy to respond to your further questions. I think we have great coordination on any emergency response, and appreciate the fire district's work on this. One thing I might add is that one of the biggest causes of leaks, as some of you know, is contractors digging in to pipes. And we have a very broad-based campaign now called Call 811 Before You Dig. And it's just good to remind everyone here that when you employ contractors around your home to do any renovation, do any work, any construction work, they are obligated by law to call 811 to make sure they have the precise location of the gas lines that serve your homes. But it's always good for you to ask the contractors, because again, the leaks that we see are by a great majority caused by dig-ins, contractors, third parties, that are usually inadvertent, but also very often due to the failure of the contractor to call 811 and get the map. So just throw that out. Really appreciate everybody's awareness of that. Thanks, Rich.
Anything else, Rich? Okay. So that concludes the updates. Let me just say before we move to the presentation, if you look on the website when it's up, Rich's report, I happen to have a chance to look at a draft of it. You can see how we benefit from Rich's expertise in all things emergency related. And I should also mention Frank is an internationally recognized expert in pipeline and pipeline pressures in the oil and gas industry. So we have two civilians on our board who just happen to have the expertise that really pays off for us when it comes to issues like this. What we're going to do now is make a brief presentation. Rich and I are going to kind of take turns to talk about the subjects that each of us has taken responsibility to look into. So we'll bounce back and forth a bit. We won't cover the ground that we covered in the April 6th meeting, so you won't have to hear again about our hardscrabble roots and how we were pushed to the brink of insolvency by San Anselmo in the 70s, how we engineered an extracted promise from San Anselmo to keep Station 20 open in 2004, how we parlayed that and our reserves into membership on the Ross Valley Fire Board after 28 years of being a non-voting member. So where we are today and what we're going to focus on today are status reports and updates on some of the topics that were raised at the April 6th meeting and subsequent to the April 6th meeting, as well as in the 30-day comment period that just closed. Let me say about that real quickly that the comment period never really closes. We just need to be able to take a snapshot at some point and answer the questions that have come in. So you're invited to continue to submit comments, questions, recommendations continuously. But we'll report on what we've got, what we've heard from you in this presentation, and then we'll have a chance to talk about all of that after we've concluded the presentation. Right? Rich, I think you lead
Point
off.
of order, Mr. Chair. Yes, since all three directors are members of the Sleepy Hollow Homeowners Association and one director was an officer of the Sleepy Hollow Charitable Foundation, there is a clear conflict of interest. All directors must recuse themselves from making any decisions to take any action on this agenda item.
Thank you. Rich, would you go ahead?
Okay, outreach and engagement. As everybody knows, project's been going on for a while. There have been 8 publicly noticed meetings, a couple of informational mass mailers regarding the projects and advertising meetings like this one. We did a really comprehensive PowerPoint presentation at our last meeting. It's been up on the website for a long time. 2 30-day solicitations of public comment. To Tom's point, those are to get a snapshot. We continue to take public comment, obviously. Numerous responsive documents. There's a lot of detailed information on the website that are responsive to the types of questions and recommendations that we've been getting. We have letters of support from public safety officials, and we have had numerous private meetings and discussions and emails and public records requests with concerned citizens. So it's not just we sit here, people ask us to meet with them and explain things, and we've given a lot of time to doing that. As you remember, at the April 6th meeting, we asked people to make recommendations about this project or other projects they had in mind. We talked about several of them, went through a 30-day period. In our meeting in June, I think it was June 27th, something like that, we spent 2.5 hours briefing our response and taking questions and answers based on all the recommendations we received. And then we posted a 14-page document on our website taking all of those recommendations and giving our analysis and our feelings and our thoughts and so forth about the pros and cons of that. I'm not going to go over that because we've covered that territory before and it is available to you. However, just in quick summary, they really fall into 3 areas. There's things that we can easily continue to fund and support, fire flow improvements, you heard that today, the fire pump program, vegetation management, chippers, all that stuff, road access, wow, I guess we heard about that, community preparedness programs, and charitable contribution. We might be able to support, if a new facility is built, some backup communications, possibly a connection to a fiber loop, trailer caches where they make sense, safety upgrades to schools where they make sense, and the SRA fee is a more complicated issue, but we're looking into that. Again, written explanations of our position on all of these things, quite detailed, available on the website, briefed out at the last meeting.
What is SRA mean?
Is the state responsibility area. The state of California, a couple of years ago, you may know, decided that they would charge all residents who lived in unincorporated areas a state responsibility area fee to pay for fire protection, ostensibly to pay for fire protection. However, the legislation also says that the fee is payable only by those people who are not served by a municipal fire department. Well, we are served by a municipal fire department, and so we don't think we should have to pay the SRA fee, which is, I think, $135 a parcel this year.
117.
I think it's going up, but the issue is being litigated in Sacramento by the Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association, and so we're not in a position to take a position on it until we've seen the outcome of the litigation.
Yeah, there's quite a bit of detail on our website. And then there's some things that we just can't fund. We just can't fund full-time public safety positions. I mean, for example, putting an extra ambulance in, that's $1 million a year. Those are ongoing expenses. Our reserves will be depleted in one time whatsoever. Undergrounding of utilities is, as again, it's discussed on the website, but it's a much bigger project. It requires all the community to buy in, pay for it all. It's vastly expensive. And then some people suggest that we simply return the reserves. Again, I refer you to the website. There's a lot of discussion about that. We don't think it's a good idea. And that's all things that have been discussed, briefed on the website for quite some time. There's one remaining issue that's a little bit of a surprise to me. And this is a quote from one of the documents on the website. This is our document we prepared. It's called Red Cross Standards for Emergency Shelter and Evacuation Centers. And I'm going to read this to you because this has been up there for a long time. It is the intention of the Sleepy Hollow Fire Protection District to work with the Sleepy Hollow Homes Association to enter into a pre-disaster agreement with the Red Cross, work with both groups to provide shelter training and regular exercises for interested district volunteers, and provide the support necessary to ensure that the Sleepy Hollow Clubhouse-based emergency shelter meets all Red Cross standards. Not only has that been on the website for more than a month, this topic is covered extensively in the 14-page analysis we did, and it has been briefed at all the meetings we've had. There is a misunderstanding that a few have here based on one line from the minutes of a meeting that was held, I believe, last November. And in that, I'm referring to the existing building. This building, right now today, is not recognized as a shelter by the County of Marin, and it does not have a Red Cross shelter agreement. So it doesn't comply with this. My reference on that day, which has been completely misinterpreted, was relative to the existing building. As I'm saying, this building is not a shelter today. So I want to be very clear. It is our intention in the new facility relative to this to do exactly what we say here. And there's a lot more detail on the website about that. So there should be no more mystery around what the goal here is. I'll turn this over to Tom at this point.
Okay. Well, as you can see in the yellow highlighted portion, we're not conducting a formal vote on whether to participate in the clubhouse project or whether to place this on a ballot or anything else that's subject to a public plebiscite. Instead, we're evaluating the project based on its merits and the input we've received. We're providing this information to you so you can get an idea of what we are hearing from the residents. The fact is we spend most of our time dealing with a handful of opponents. But we do get a large majority of people who've sent us compelling messages of support. The simple fact is that based upon the responses we've received, the community seems to want us to pursue this Community and Disaster Recovery Center project. In the most recently closed public comment period, we received expressions of support from 26 different homes in Sleepy Hollow, or in the district. Of those, 20 were new respondents who have never responded previously. 6 of them were people who did respond previously, so we don't count them since they've made a previous response. In addition, we received 8 responses from people who are opposed to the project. Just 2 of those were new respondents. 6 of them were people who responded in opposition in the past. And let me make clear, just so you know how we've counted this. We're not going to raise the tally for someone who sends in a number of responses, like voting for one of the Giants on the All-Star team. You can't submit multiple votes and have those count. Instead, you're counted just once, and your opposition is noted unless you express a change of heart and decide to oppose or favor. In addition, if we receive multiple responses from a single household, if they all express the same feeling, opposition or support, we count that as one. So for instance, we've had one household that supports it, both the husband and wife, actually 2 households, both husband and wife wrote individually. We also have a household that opposes it, both parents and a child wrote individually. We count those just as one each, all right? We think that's the fairest way to do it.
Excuse me.
Yes.
I understand you taking all of this information in. And my question is, I believe, and I know all of you, that you know that as members of the board, that you have a fiduciary responsibility to everybody, correct?
Correct.
So, and my question is, rather than making your decision based upon whether somebody wants it or doesn't want it, I would hope that your decision is based upon what is the best use of taxpayer funds for fire prevention.
I would refer you to the second sentence. We are evaluating this project based on its merits and the input received. So, I mean, I agree. We are not conducting a formal vote.
Right.
Right.
So we're all on the same page.
It's not a popularity contest. We're trying to be analytical about it and not be swayed, but we have a duty to report the facts. We've asked people to respond. These are the results.
No, I understand.
I would add to you, because we say this again and again, that we are not just a fire protection district. We're an emergency preparedness district. And we answer one fire call and we answer 20 emergency calls. If you have a heart attack and you wake up, the face that you'll be looking at is a fireman, paramedic. And that's what we're about.
Thank you. Rich, the next slide. Okay.
Wait, what?
In the second round of comments, this period that just closed, we didn't receive any new recommendations or suggestions from anyone about possible alternative projects or concurrent projects. Those were all received in the first batch, and we addressed them at our June 27th meeting, and we're going to talk about them again today in detail. Instead, the comments have mostly focused upon four things. One is the legality of what we are considering doing. Secondly, the access to the project for residents who do not belong to the Homes Association. The third is whether or not pursuing the project would cause us to abandon our traditional services or other services that people think we should be providing. The fourth is whether emergency communications in the event they're needed are safe and secure. And then finally, the methodology of our financial analysis about the proposed leasehold interest that we seek to obtain. And with that, I'll move Rich to the next one.
You got the next one.
Yeah, all right. And this one is mine. Very generally, you should know that we are chartered and authorized under what's called the Fire District Law of 1987. It was an update after a half century of various provisions in the Health and Safety Code of California to consolidate them all in one section of the code. And sections 13,800 et sec authorize fire protection districts to do what they do. Those include the authority to enter into leases and other agreements for the benefit of the district, to provide any services relating to the protection of lives and property, and to disseminate information and operate educational programs. So we believe we're within our charter in pursuing this project. The next question that's come up a couple of times is whether this constitutes an impermissible gift of public funds to a private organization. These are generally prohibited by the California Constitution, except when you're appropriating funds for a public purpose and it's legislatively determined to be reasonable. And that applies even if doing so provides incidental benefits to other persons or entities, so long as it supports the agency's public purpose. As we said numerous times in the April 6th meeting and subsequently, there's no donation here. I know some people like to use that word. A donation is a gift. We're not proposing to make a gift. We're proposing to invest some funds in the construction of the facility for which we will receive value in return. That's not a gift. That's an exchange of value. Rich, could you take this one? The
Yeah.
access for
Okay, so, this is a big and very important topic, and it has been from the very start of this project, the position of our board, that a new community center must provide equal access and benefit to all residents of the district. We told the Homes Association that from day one. We represent more than just Sleepy Hollow proper. And we have consistently stated the same thing in all of our public comments. No news here. Last night, which was actually Thursday night now, the Homeowners Association adopted the following resolution in support of equal access and benefit for all residents. I'm going to read it to you. It will be on their website. I know it's not today, but it will be shortly. So they had a meeting on Thursday, and here's what they said. It takes a few minutes to read this, so bear with me. So the Board of Directors of the Sleepy Hollow Homes Association has decided to adopt the following resolution. The Board of Directors shall seek to negotiate a definitive agreement with the Sleepy Hollow Fire Protection District in return for the district's contribution of up to $2 million towards the construction of a new community center using the following principles for the negotiation. When completed, the Sleepy Hollow Community Center, Community Emergency and Preparedness Center, shall serve the entire Sleepy Hollow Fire Protection District. All Sleepy Hollow Fire Protection District services provided, including fire protection and emergency response benefits, will be available to all fire district taxpayers and property owners without regard to whether they are dues-paying members of the Sleepy Hollow Homes Association or where they reside within the fire district. Number 2, all services provided and supported by the Sleepy Hollow Fire Protection District will be free of charge and open to any resident of the fire district. 3, access to the community center will be available to any resident within the fire district. Fees associated with access to the community center will be at the same rate for all fire district residents, and there will be no exceptions or distinctions made among Sleepy Hollow residents, Sleepy Hollow Home Association members, and those fire district residents who reside outside the Sleepy Hollow boundaries or within the fire district boundaries, and solely in regards to community center access fees. The board of directors may consider adopting additional principles to guide the negotiations with the district as appropriate. 5, upon completion of the draft definitive agreement with the fire district consistent with these principles, the board of directors will provide the membership of the Sleepy Hollow Homes Association with notice of the draft agreement and an opportunity to provide comments on the draft agreement at meeting of the board of directors prior to the board of directors voting to approve, disapprove, or modify the draft agreement. The resolution was voted on at a meeting and it was unanimously passed. So this is a document from the Homes Association. I've been told it'll be on their website. I don't have copies for them because I don't have the official one in my hand and all, but that's their document, and questions about it are best addressed to them, but I think it reinforces the principle we're talking about.
Could you tell me how far the fire district goes, Sleepy Hollow Fire District?
I'm probably the best person to do that because I'm the only survivor when all the bad news took place. 40 or so years ago, 30 houses then, 40 houses now, that were in the county and were not in San Anselmo, on the border of the Sleepy Hollow Fire Protection District. And I think quite truthfully, the reason that they approached us was because they didn't want to pay San Anselmo taxes. And we, for good or bad reasons, said to these 40 homes, yes, you can pay your taxes to the Sleepy Hollow Fire Protection District, and we will provide you with fire protection via San Anselmo, Fairfax. Those houses are still there, and they're still in this funny limbo, because the straightforward thing for them to do is to vote to annex to San Anselmo. They don't choose to do that. You can guess at what their reasons are, and we take their fire tax money and we provide them through the fire houses here in San Anselmo and Fairfax with fire protection. 40 of them, if there was a map here, I could show you where they are. But that is how it's happening. That is why our boundary is different from Sleepy Hollow's boundary. As I say, if I was out there, a map, you can see this little pocket down there. And yes, question.
Well, before you do, let me just, Betsy, to answer your question, I believe there's 41 houses. They are all on, in the area of the Alameda, starting at about number 500, I believe, on the Alameda and upwards, as well as Quail Way and Oak Crest Road. And then there's one at the end of Michael Court and Timothy Court each. Yeah, they're all on the western boundary of our district, just before you enter the gates of Sleepy Hollow.
Thank you.
I'm Bob Wilson.
Eastern boundary.
Okay.
Do I have the floor?
I'm sorry, yeah.
I'm Bob Wilson, 28 Dutch Valley Lane. On your annual report for the fire district, if you can pull it up on your computer and display it. I don't know if you can.
Oh, I can't, not like
Okay, well, they have a map of the district. It includes Ross, San Anselmo, Fairfax, And basically, that's it.
That's the service area for the Ross Valley Fire Department.
Exactly.
We're one of 4 member agencies of that department. So yes, our subset of that is our little district, which is all of what is considered to be Sleepy Hollow plus the 41 houses that are on the fringe of Sleepy Hollow. Thanks.
Yes.
I'd like to ask for clarification on the presentation. This isn't my comment. It's a clarification on what's been presented today. I didn't, just to be clear, Director Berto, you're saying that the homes outside of the Sleepy Hollow boundary do not pay taxes in San Anselmo?
I do believe they pay county taxes because they're not in San Anselmo. They're in the county of Marin.
Okay, the other clarification is about the Red Cross statement that you made earlier, which was, as you say, it's the intention of the Fire Protection District, it's the intention of the Fire Protection District to enter into a pre-disaster agreement with the Red Cross. And you said that there was a misinterpretation of the minutes from November 27th, 2013. So I just want to read the section that you say is being misinterpreted. And, you know, to clarify whether this misinterpretation has to do with what was said or how the notes were written. Director Shortall also stated that the clubhouse would be designed to function as a public shelter in the event of emergencies. He said that under mutual aid principles, emergency users would not be limited to district residents. However, Director Shortall stated that the clubhouse would not likely qualify as a designated shelter, staffed and supported by the Red Cross. So you're referring to the clubhouse, the clubhouse is capitalized here in this same paragraph in 3 sentences, and you're saying that the first 2 sentences are about the future of the clubhouse, whereas the 3rd sentence, Director Shortall stated that the clubhouse would not likely qualify as a designated shelter. That is though about the current clubhouse, where the 2 sentences before that are about the future clubhouse. So that's a little unclear. Director Shortall stated that the clubhouse would be designated to function as a public shelter. That emergency users would not be limited to district residents, and that the clubhouse would not likely qualify as a designated shelter. So are you saying that you're referring to the clubhouse currently or the clubhouse in the future?
I think I was very clear on this. Our intention is crystal clear for the
Right.
future of this
Your
building.
intention, though, is not what the Red Cross's intention is necessarily.
You know, this won't be a back and forth. I think I was very clear on what I said. My comments at that meeting, which I made clear, had to do with the fact that this building is not a county designated shelter right now, nor is a Red Cross designated shelter. That is this building. What should be of interest to everybody, and what matters, and what we've been talking about for months now, and been very clear and written about, so there's no mystery about it, is that we are going forward with a very clear direction here. We want the new facility to meet all the Red Cross standards, to be accepted to them as a shelter, to have an agreement with them, and to do regular training and exercises for the people out here in this community. That's what matters. That's really simple to understand. That's very straightforward.
Excellent.
Rich, I understand it, thank you.
That's one person.
Well, I think we should hold on for 1 second. I think we want to conduct a meeting in a respectful fashion. I don't think that's respectful.
Yeah.
What I said wasn't?
No, I'm sorry. I'm speaking to Bruce. I think what Bruce said was not respectful. I think we need to respect everybody has an opportunity. Let's leave it at that. Thank you. Okay, let's go on. The next issue that was brought up is whether or not the Sleepy Hollow Fire Protection has basically abandoned its traditional role in providing services here. If anything, I believe we've expanded the role. If you look back in the history of this, mostly what was done was simply paying for the contract with the town of San Anselmo to provide fire protection services. We're doing much more than that now. We had a presentation from John Hanley about Youth to Work. And that Youth to Work is out there repairing fire roads, which we are paying for. We have paid almost every year over the last several years to have what's called the TAM Fire Crew go out and create essentially defensible space for fire roads around the ridges of Sleepy Hollow. Some of that is on the border of open space, some of it's not. One problem with open space is we don't own open space. We didn't own that land before, and the fire district did not go out there and maintain that land before. It's not our land, it's open space land. Unfortunately, there's a lot of controversy with some of the positions of the open space district relative to clearing of fire roads and keeping it fire safe. We are on record, I believe, as saying that we want to do all we can to make sure that our fire roads are maintained in good condition. We have been paying where we can to help make that happen. We'll be continuing to do that, and the proof is in the pudding. We just paid for an expensive repair on a fire road out here. We'll continue to do that. We'll continue to work with the TAM Fire Crew. We have not abandoned our responsibility for this. We have increased our participation in these programs. The second one has to do with fire flow. And this has been briefed. You can read about it online in our response. But basically, all of you do pay to improve fire flow in Sleepy Hollow. When Chief Hansen was here, he's talking about a program that your tax dollars are paid for, where the money goes directly to MMWD, and it's MMWD, Marin Municipal Water District, that is responsible for the pipes in the ground, not the Sleepy Hollow Fire Protection District. What we have done is worked with them and the fire department to determine areas where it makes sense to add an extra fire hydrant if it will improve fire protection, or to update a fire hydrant because it needs a new one or whatever. We've done that in the past. We'll continue to do that, and once again, look what happened at today's meeting. It came in, we asked for it, well, I'll take the resolution in the next meeting, but you see where we're going with it. That is hardly an abandonment of services. Disaster manual is left to the Sleepy Hollow Homes Association. We've never said that. I don't know where that statement comes from. I have talked quite a bit at meetings, and you'll see a lot of it on the website, that my personal interest is in community preparedness, because I think community preparedness is the best type of preparedness. Individual's nice, government can only do so much. Community preparedness programs are the most effective for making us safe. I very much intend to see us work to produce our own disaster manual, which we will put out to every member of the community. We're happy to work with the Homeowners Association so that we can add material to anything that they would put out, but we are not abrogating our responsibility on this. And part of the proof of that is take a look at the document that you can get in the mail in a few days, which is the fire safe document out there. This is the kind of work we're doing. This is the kind of work we'll keep doing. There is no abandonment of service here. PG&E responsibility for utility hazards. I just gave a big report on that. Bottom line is, we don't run the gas system, we don't run the electric system. We are interested in making sure that they're doing the best they can for us. I've reported on that. I want to make sure that the fire department thinks that they're doing the best they can. We all believe that right now. To the extent, and I appreciate whatever may need to go forward, if there's something more that needs to be done on that, great, but right now, I think people are working very well together. We have a good system. We are not abrogating our responsibilities. We don't maintain the natural gas lines or the overhead utility lines. Mira, I'm going to talk about this in a few minutes, but we are actually very interested in MIRA, which is the Marin Emergency Radio Authority. I'll be briefing that out quite a bit on the next slide, I think. But we do care about that, and we do care about public safety communications. But again, we need to be clear what's our responsibility and what isn't. So when you consider today's presentations, we talked about fire flow and hydrants, funding it, chipper day, funding it, customized prevention brochure, funding it, fire and repair, funding it, new websites, PG&E, and soon to be MIRA. I think it is not true to say that we are abandoning our services. We're expanding our role going forward. Okay, question about that.
About 10 years ago, when I was president of the Home Association, I did have the privilege of republishing the phone book with the disaster manual, which I think is one of the most important resources that the Home Association provides its members. And I really appreciate your commitment, Rich, that the fire district is not going to abandon services. But I want to ask kind of the flip side of that, and that is, as the fire district considers a partnership or agreement with the Home Association, do you intend to actually also look at enhancing the services of the fire district in partnership with the Home Association? Because community preparedness is, as Frank said, an emergency response are really key goals and strategies for the fire district, but they also are shared with the Home Association, particularly in terms of disaster preparedness. So as you go forward to consider whether to invest in a partnership with the Home Association, do you intend to actually also look at how that partnership can enhance the fire district services as well?
Yes, is the short answer to that. In fact, in the agreement that we work out with the Homes Association, one of our conditions for that agreement is in fact going to be that the Homeowners Association, both as an association and as the manager or whatever of the facility, is going to need to step up to the plate to support community preparedness programs. I am confident that they're going to want to do that, but we are going to hold them to that. More than that, and there's a lot of discussion of this in the 14-page analysis out there, a new facility properly designed here is actually going to make it much easier to organize community preparedness programs that we'd like to see happen. Right now, it's not the ideal situation, and sadly, we really don't have much going on out here at all. We really want to change that. There was a lot of discussion of that, and going forward, we believe that the partnership will provide great benefit for community preparedness for everybody. That's a good point to bring up.
Yeah, and Rich, to that point, to your point, as a current board member, we definitely need to update the disaster manual, so it's on my plate, and I'm going to work with Rich to actually do that.
Great, thank you.
All right. So emergency communications. I got to give a little bit of my background on this because this is I have to put my geek hat on for this thing, really. As most of you know, I was the deputy director of the San Francisco Office of Emergency Services for several years, and in fact, my office was in the 911 Communication Center in San Francisco. There's a lot of people working in the field of emergency communications there. They love what they do. They love to talk about what they do, and it took me a long time to get up to snuff with them to try to learn all about simulcast zones and smartcasts and talk groups and on and on and on and on. But sitting with them every day, I did learn a lot about it, and it is a very interesting topic. From there, I went on to become the general manager of the Bay Area Homeland Security Grant, which is a program, and I went through, I think I spent about, I say I because I was the manager, about $80 million in a few years. Our top priority for funding was emergency communication systems and all. So many of the regional programs that are in place right now that are big improvements to what was there before were really funded by the grant program that I helped found out there. So I worked quite a bit with people, and that meant that I had to be aware of how these programs worked and what we were funding because I had to sign off on all these grants. And currently, I represent the Ross Valley Fire Department on the governing board of MIRA, which is the Marin Emergency Radio Authority. So I go to their meetings, I hear what's going on, I feel I'm pretty up to date on what they're doing out there. It is geeky stuff, and so I'm going to kind of try to stay away from all the technical jargon and just go to some big points about this. And I don't want to have an extensive back and forth about the minutiae of technical detail. I'll take somebody offline if they want to talk about that. I just want to make the big points. MIRA, Marin Emergency Radio Authority, it's a radio system for public safety personnel. I don't go on it. I'm not a public safety personnel. Communications, our community center would not have a MIRA radio. It's not what it's set up for. It's for fire, police, public works, that type of people. Our current system needs replacement. It's old. They have about a 25-year life expectancy. It needs to be replaced. You're going to get a chance to vote on that. We took a position of supporting it. I hope the vote passes. I know it's a little bit controversial, but we really need a new system. It's aging. This is pretty important. There is no RFP, request for proposal. That is the exact technical details of the new system. It's called Next Generation. The RFP has not been produced for that yet. So comments about it's not going to be this and it's not going to be that and all the rest of it are really not founded on an existing document. But there have been policy principles put forward by the governing bodies and so forth. You can read about a lot of this. You can go on their website if you really want to have fun with 700 megahertz and all this other crazy stuff. This is called the Marine Radio Emergency Radio Authority Next Generation Radio System Implementation and Feasibility Study. It's on there, you can download it. A lot of what I say is going to be in here. But the policy direction at this point is for there to be complete compliance with all the federal and regional specifications for a modern, efficient, wonderful radio system for our public safety personnel. It will comply with or exceed all the standards in P25, 700 megahertz, on and on and on. That's the direct policy direction. The mirror system will be fully interoperable, and what that means is, everybody's heard about this before, you have a big fire in Marin County, you have a fire department comes from Santa Clara, if they come up here, can they talk on their radios to the people here? That's what interoperable communications is basically all about, because they don't do it day to day. There already is an interoperable, beginnings of a completely interoperable system in the Bay Area. The new system will be completely interoperable, so any public safety personnel who come in here will be able to get on our system, we'll all be able to talk to each other. The system is a redundant system. It's not a couple of towers, and if the tower falls down, the whole thing falls apart. Works with microwave, towers all over the hills here, repeaters, backup generators, on and on and on. There's a lot of redundancy in the system. Parts of the system can fail. Towers can fall down, the system can still work. It can degrade the effectiveness of the system, but it can work. In fact, the whole system can collapse, and the handheld portable radios, at least in line of sight, can still talk to each other. So it has a lot of backup to the system. That's how they build them. A statement was made that it only has 3 days of fuel. I just met, as a matter of fact, with this past week with a couple people from Mira. I went over all the stuff with them to make sure I got it right. And in fact, they have 9 days of emergency fuel. They just did a test on all that. Mira is a member of something called BAYRICS. That was one of the things that was set up when I was doing the Homeland Security Grant programs. And basically, it's a 13-member joint powers authority. It's made up of the counties and some of the big cities that surround the Bay Area out here. It's meant to work together to create interoperable communications and share standards and share specifications of how things should be done. Marin County has a seat on their governing board, and Marin County has a seat on their technical committees, and some people who used to work for Marin County are actually full-time employees of the project. So Marin County, through its representation, is very supportive of BAYRICS, very involved in it, and supports the specifications that they come up with. A program that was asked about is something called FirstNet. FirstNet is a program, it's a relatively new federal program. It hasn't been built yet. The goal of the program really has to do with sharing data. It's not primarily about voice beating. You see the firefighter out there in the walkie-talkie talking to each other. This is really data. Certainly fire departments use data, everybody does, but obviously police departments move a lot more data, checking files and all these other types of things. It's a really good concept, and it's the funding is kind of unique because what they call auction spectrum. There's all this radio spectrum, and they auctioned a bunch of it, and they got some money for it, so it's kind of exciting. It's not built. It's supported by BAYRICS. It's supported by the Marin County representatives who are on the BAYRICS committee, but it's not here yet. When it comes, it's going to be a while. It's not a simple system. There's going to be a ton of work that needs to go into it. It's not the same as the Mira radio system. This is really a system primarily for data. Primarily for data. In the documents that I put on the website a while ago are analysis things. On there, I briefed 12 communication systems that will be in this center if this facility is built. I was questioned in a letter about the accuracy of what's in there. I stand by 100% what is written on there. It's very simple. It doesn't overpromise. I don't say any of these things is the magic answer. There's qualifiers on lots of things, and basically it's an effort to just give a very 1 or 2 sentence explanation of how these things work. There's no statement on my part that these things are infallible, so you need to understand that. But I ran by our communication program by the people at Mira who do this for a living, who are responsible for these kinds of programs. They're extremely impressed with what we're planning to do. There's a lot of redundancy to it. There's a lot of good things in there. There's a lot of positives. All every one of them has pros and cons. But when you have a whole bunch of them, layer upon layer upon layer of redundancy, that's how you start building up a robust communication network. One of the suggestions is that we look into something called the Zayo fiber optic loop. This is kind of interesting. I spoke not only to the Mira people about this, I spoke to the Zayo representative a couple times about this, and I spoke to Martin Thornton, who is the head of the Marin Telecommunications Agency, which is responsible for fiber optic systems and so forth that are in the county, also Comcast and all those types of things. So we talked about it. Fiber is a fairly simple concept. It's a cable. It could be in the ground. It could be up in the air. In this case, there are cables in the ground. They're really cool. They can move massive amounts of data. Amazing. They're exciting. This particular one was put in to serve one customer, which is George Lucas. George Lucas Studios, everybody knows how they work. They make the Star Wars movies. They need to share vast amounts of data. They have facilities all over the place. You need something like this for that to happen. Doesn't mean that's the only thing it could ever be used for, but that's what it was made for. It's what they call dark fiber. And dark fiber means it's basically just a cable in the ground. To light it up, as they like to say, basically you got to put a third party, not them, has to put power into the system. You have to have the equipment on either end of it, the computers, whatever you're using. You have to have the applications that you can use on those computers. You have to have protocols for using all the stuff. You have to have people there. It's very complicated. In the hierarchy of these kinds of systems, the simplest part of the whole thing is the cable. That's just the thing in the ground. Making all the rest of this stuff happen is much more complicated. The stuff is expensive. It's about Zayo says it's about $70 a square foot for them to put it in. We talked about whether we can connect to it through other means, like going down through AT&T, which uses fiber and so forth. It can be done. It's very complicated. It's not cheap. But it's something to consider. Everybody that I talk to, whether they be at Zayo themselves, or Mira, or the Marin Telecommunications, nobody thinks any of this would be free. And nobody saw, as of right now, a public safety benefit to the program. There is some talk that maybe FirstNet in the future would be a good candidate for that. But it's not the only fiber that's out there. That's one system out there. There's a lot of other systems out there. So for example, it was suggested that we should connect to the Woodacre Fire Department. Woodacre Fire Department already uses cable. They use cable to make their CAD system work. They use lease lines from AT&T. Marin County has a big fiber network called the Midas One, which serves a lot of people, both in government, the libraries, government agencies, police departments, and so forth, nonprofits and whatnot. They do leasing lines from AT&T. So the bottom line is this, that the Zayo fiber optic loop is not a sitting right there, ready to go, solves all our problems, just connect, it's free, and piece of cake. It's extremely complicated whether or not this will have benefit in the future. No closed mind to this, but massive data transfer from our communication center through that is not a need that we're going to have. And I want to point out one more thing. Fiber is not disaster proof. None of the other systems, Mira is not disaster proof, satellite phones aren't, nothing is disaster proof. This is from Earth Week, August 1st, just happened. Powerful earthquake up in Alaska, severed the key fiber optic line on July 25th, leaving Southeast Alaska without cell phone and internet service. That's a 5.9 quake. That's not very big. Nobody got hurt, no buildings hurt. So just like any other system, fiber has its downside to and its risk. Just like gas lines get hit by construction crews, fiber lines get hit by them too. Earthquakes can happen. So is it worth considering? Yes. But you need to put this in a larger perspective out here. Our Mira system is a good system. Hopefully we fund it to become a much better system. The people who run it, who are responsible for this, who are expert on this, who I've met with, are very confident where it's going. I sit on the governing board with it. I think it's a good program. So I think we should have some confidence in this, and I think we also have a very good backup plan, which is appropriate for a community center. We are not the fire department, and I think we will be in good stead if we're able to put all that in place. Okay.
Okay, Rich, thanks, Rich. Now it falls to me to talk about the arrangements that we'd like to try to strike with the Homes Association if we proceed forward with this based upon the evaluation of the merits, the comments we get from people. A couple of things you need to know first is that we have looked at a possible arrangement from lots of different perspectives, financially, operationally, and otherwise. In all cases, this is going to be an arm's length, bargained for arrangement, where both sides are going to have their wish lists and are going to have to give something to get something. We would like to get the right to use the clubhouse, as we've said, for an office, for storage, for conducting our meetings and trainings, and then also for using it for emergency purposes, such as shelter, evacuation, and that sort of thing. And we're coming from, as you may recall from our April 6th meeting, a long history of thriftiness, self-reliance, and very long-term thinking. We're not going to jump into anything impulsively. What we would like to do is, and I'm jumping ahead a little bit, so you don't need to move the slides, Rich, but our goal is to come up with a game plan for how we would try to negotiate with the Homes Association, and we'll get to that in a minute. But before we get there, let's talk very briefly about the lease or the arrangement that we will make to be able to use the clubhouse as we would like to. What we did was we asked two of the leading commercial real estate firms in the region to opine on our proposal. That includes an evaluation of the comparable rental rates for properties in the Ross Valley. It also included various analyses that factored in the unique backup systems that we'll have here, water and power, which you don't get at most locations, the pool, which we'll have available for training, which you don't get at a typical office location, as well as what the discounted present value might be if we opted, instead of investing in this project, to park our money in an asset that has a fixed rate of return. So we've sliced this thing in a number of ways, and we'll get to each one of them individually. Basically, we talked with Mark Carrington first at Cornish & Carey, Newmark Knight Frank Commercial. He's one of the leading brokers in the North Bay. He's done over $2.5 billion worth of transactions from San Diego to Anchorage in his career. He provided us with some spreadsheet calculations that, working off of the square footage numbers that we gave him and his knowledge of local comparable properties, he gave us some figures that would show, and do show, that if we pay up to $2 million, we're going to be making a great bargain for ourselves. Because to try to duplicate the arrangement that we'd like to get elsewhere, off-site, somewhere in the Ross Valley, outside of our own district, it would cost us a lot more than just $2 million. In fact, I'm a little bit worried that the Homes Association is going to push back now and say we're giving you too good of a deal. But I hope that's not the case. In any event, you see some figures there that we've put up on the board. I think you can do the math or go to the website yourself and run the numbers. We've tried to simplify it as much as we can. This assumes, of course, the going rental rates with a 3% annual increase, or 15% every 5 years, which is very reasonable. We also consulted, could you hang on just a second? We also consulted with Stephen Easley. He's the vice president at Cassidy Turley, another one of the region's leading brokerages. Steve is the founder and was the president of Meridian Commercial before he moved to Cassidy Turley. He provided us with data about properties both in and outside of the Ross Valley, what the rental rates currently are. Of course, it's very difficult to find a strictly comparable property to this anywhere in the market. So we've had to do a little bit of stretching of what constitutes a comparable in order to get the data that we need to work with. Rich, maybe you can go to the next slide. So what we did in our analysis is we tried to look at what we thought was the total public safety value of what we want to do, not strictly basing it upon rental rates and that sort of thing. What do we capture here if we're able to do this? And we think it exceeds $4 million. $4 million for our $2 million investment. Now, the reason is that the Homes Association is going to contribute the land. we're going to contribute some of the building costs, and you residents are contributing through your donations another $500,000 worth of cash. We think that together with the leasehold valuations that we've performed exceed $4 million. For instance, we're not even including any of the quote-unquote intangible values that the brokers tell us are reasonable to consider when you're deciding whether to rent a property. That includes the peace of mind that you get when you know that you've got an asset like this nearby your home. The convenience factor, the ability for us to have an office, to leverage our resources, to hold the trainings, meetings, and those sorts of things that are not currently available to us and can't be created elsewhere in the district. So what we did was, in addition to the straight ahead calculation on rental rates, we said, what would happen if we, instead of proceeding with this, what would happen if we put our money to work in some sort of a highly conservative investment? If we park that money for 60 years, like we're proposing to do here, into something that has a reasonable basis to return money to us. Well, assuming the annual 3% CPI increases, and the current yields on 30-year treasuries, which are 3.38%, we again came up with a value that well exceeds $2 million. In fact, we ran a second scenario using 4% on the 30-year treasuries just to see what it would do, and it produced an even more beneficial effect for us. Just a note on that, someone said to me in passing in the neighborhood, you should be using the 10-year treasuries, because that's what's used as the basis for most mortgages. And we ran that as well, although we didn't ask the experts to do it, but we did that ourselves. And as you may know, the 10-year treasury rates are quite low. They carry less durational risk than the 30s, of course, because more things can happen over a 30-year period. But what I did was, taking our 60-year term, which is equal to the current life of the building. As you know, this building has reached the end of its life. Benign neglect is no longer a feasible strategy for this building. So I tried to find a comparable period of 60 years for the 10-year treasuries. I couldn't get 60, but I found 70. And I'll tell you what, that the median yield over the last 70 years for 10-year treasuries is 6.25%. So we're being even more conservative than the 10-year treasuries would pay. And that's, of course, assuming the 10 years revert to normal over this next 60-year period that we're talking about using. The 30-year treasuries are even more likely to revert because they have a longer term, right? So we've been super, super conservative in how we run our present value calculation. So the current worth of our $2 million, today would be $2.6 million plus if it were invested for the next 60 years. So we said, we're getting a bargain today, right? We're going to put that money to work now and get more than that for it later, right?
Question, Tom.
Bruce?
Yeah, Tom, thank you. Two things. First of all, you're assuming that you're just going to, the comparison you're using is you're going to park the money and make it work for you. But what we're saying is you haven't analyzed using this money and doing upgrades over time. So the $2 million becomes 1.5, 1 million, $500,000, whatever it is. So that assumption wasn't made. And the second assumption, which is very troubling to me, in the document, they continue to call it a capital lease. The capital lease assumes that we're building equity and we're going to buy the property out. And that's not true. It's not a capital lease, it's an operating lease.
Bruce, I'm afraid you're misinformed. A capital lease is only an accounting fiction about how the rent is paid and how it's characterized for tax purposes and accounting purposes. In a capital lease, the rent payments are capitalized. In an operating lease, they're deductible as operating expenses. A capital lease is defined under the Federal Accounting Standards Board, or the Financial Accounting Standards Board, standard number 13.
Right.
And among the other requirements that you can use to qualify as a capital lease is if more than 75% of the economic life of the leased property is covered in the lease. If we're assuming that the next building that might go in here is going to last for 60 years, just like this, then we're over that 75% threshold from the start. Right?
Thank you. My background is I was a computer lessor for 25 years, and I understand FASB 13, and I'm not going to argue with you in this venue, but I would like to discuss it with you because I disagree with some of the comments you made.
All right, thank you.
I'd just like to say to the audience, my delight, and I hope you feel the same way, at the two people that I have sitting on either side of me who bring this tremendous expertise to our little organization for next to nothing. We are just blessed. I am blessed. I'm probably going to get off this thing in about 6 more months, and I've been on it for 35 years. But in that time period, it has been just a delight that geniuses such as these two keep coming forward and offering their services for next to nothing. Thank you.
Here, here.
Frank embellishes shamelessly. Let me just go on with this, and rather than bask in the glow of those comments. The next, I'm sorry, Evelyn?
I just, maybe a standard lease might be 20 years. Where did the 60-year
Building like.
Where did that come from? In terms of your, not the building, which I'm talking about, in terms of the fire protection districts needing to lease space, why 60 years?
We like to have an operation here perpetually. If the next building lasts as long as this building, 60 years from now, we'll have to do this all over again. So we chose 60 years to match the current life, which is ending of this building.
But given that the standard lease for something you're looking for might be less, would be, let's say, 20 years, why choose 60 years? Just because the building itself will last 60 years? How do you know you wouldn't want to move to another building in 20 years?
I'll get to that,
Okay.
if I can.
I have a question, I'm sorry.
Yes.
2 questions, actually. One is that you said that you would use the fire district, I believe, use the pool for training. What would you mean, training for what? And how often would you do it?
Okay, we have a very active fire pumps program. We have 27 pumps scattered around. Each person that takes custody of one of the pumps, we have 5 more people getting pumps this summer, has to participate in a training session here at the pool that's run by the fire department and by us, teaching them how to use the pump, how to care for the pump, and then we actually operate the pump. We squirt water all over the place. That's what we use the pool for. The fire department's also talked about using the pool for other, some of their activities as well, and we could be the conduit for doing that.
And the other question is about reserves. Considering that in about 20-25 years we'll go back to a new radio system, if you are considering to put away reserves, so when the time comes that we need to upgrade a new Mira, whatever radio system is going to be called, we'll have that money instead of going back, to have a new parcel tax assessed on us.
Right.
And if we don't have any reserves for the radio system in place now, then a chance.
All right, none of our reserves are going to pay for the radio system. We're not spending money on the Mira upgrade project. That's citizens will, correct.
For the new radio system, so we don't use some of the money of the fire protection, use the reserve for the upgrade of the radio system when that will come again, for sure.
Well, I'm a little...
It's a suggestion.
I appreciate that. I'm a little reluctant to consider spending Sleepy Hollow reserves on a county-wide radio system, right? The money came from Sleepy Hollow. We'd like to put it back to work in Sleepy Hollow rather than spread it around the county to support a system, especially a system that all the taxpayers in the county are being asked to support financially.
Thank you.
Rich, do you have a comment on that?
No, again, the good thing about that is, you can make up your mind at the ballot box. If it's not something you want to spend money on, then you can vote no.
Let me just say a couple of things about the reserves. Some of this may be repetitive from a prior meeting. Just so you know how we accumulated the reserves. In the late 70s, we were down to our last $50,000, on the verge of insolvency, right? But we got very frugal. We decided to never be put into that position again by San Anselmo, which had a lot of the responsibility for causing us to get into such dire straits. And we began saving money, squirreling it away methodically for a 35-year period so that we could, if we needed to, tell San Anselmo to take a hike, we'll start our own fire department. We're not going to knuckle under to you again. And we saved that money for that purpose. When we successfully negotiated as a 2-step process our way onto the Ross Valley Joint Powers Authority Board, the need for that fire department disappeared. So the reserves became available to us to be redesignated and put to work. They've been accumulated through methodically by my predecessors, by Frank, who think very long-term about these kinds of things. And it turned out to have been a brilliant move. It's enabling this, us to discuss this project today. Now, we don't expect our reserves to accumulate in the same fashion going forward, in part because the delta, the difference between what we receive in property tax revenue and our costs are shrinking. There was a time a few years ago where we were receiving $90,000, $100,000 a year more than what our costs were. We take some credit for negotiating a very good agreement to hold the cost down, but we don't see that trend continuing in the future. One of the things we've benefited from is the value of homes in Sleepy Hollow has gone up so much in the last 30 years that whenever they're sold and reassessed, we get a bit of a windfall as a result. We don't know that that's going to continue on either. We certainly can't take the chance that it will and make commitments to things like a radio system or something like that in advance. Okay? So let me get to the last just bullet points of the lease analysis. Again, this information's up on the website. So we think that locating here is going to give us tremendous advantages in terms of just our physical presence here, the fact that we'll have our preparedness programs here. Citizens can come in and talk to us and ask questions in a way they currently have difficulty doing because we operate out of our homes. And as I said, you drive by this place every day knowing that the fire district is there, you know, the sentinel there, then it gives you some peace of mind, I hope, that you currently don't have, because we're really a virtual organization. For the last 15 years I've been on the board, we met at Frank and Connie's dining room table. We've only begun meeting here in the clubhouse the last few years. So we've emerged from the shadows, and we're happy to do so, and we'd like to have an office, if we could, so we can clean out our garages of all the files and things that we store, and the fire pumps that have been in my backyard for the last couple of years. Okay, so one question that came up during the comment period is, why this site? Aren't there alternative sites available to you? The answer is no, there are not. First of all, there's no comparable site to this in our fire protection district. Where are you going to find a half-acre to 1 acre lot that's flat, that's level, that can accommodate a building like this, that the neighbors will tolerate, right? And that we can afford. As we've mentioned before, 140 Fawn Drive sold in July 2010 for $1.69 million, I think, $1.65 million. The house has been torn down and a new house was built. So effectively, that property was bought for the land value. If we were to spend $1.6 million on a property like that, we wouldn't have much left over to actually construct the property or to pursue the other projects that we've talked about. Now, all it takes is a casual drive around the district to realize there are no sites like this available here. There just aren't. I wish there were, but they're not. Not only that, but if we were to try to build it, the neighbors would object to the construction noise and the dust and all that, not to mention the activities that would go on there. It would be duplicative of what's already existing here at the clubhouse, right? We have a facility that's, you know, for these types of uses. And as I say, it could exhaust our reserves. So the bottom line, in our opinion, is that this is the best site to try to do this, to co-locate with the Homes Association, coattail, if you will, on their property. And there isn't a realistic alternative that exists in the district or that we can create within the district. Okay, so the next steps. So we've now reached the point where we think we want to do this. We've heard from you, we've had 8 meetings, hundreds of comments, lots of interaction with people. What do we do now? Right? Are we going to jump right into a deal with somebody, the Homes Association or the Charitable Foundation? Of course the answer is no. That's not the way we roll at the Fire Protection District. What we'd like to do today is we'd like to propose a resolution that authorizes our council to begin the draft of a letter of intent that would propose to the Homes Association some basic terms that we would like to see in whatever arrangements we might make. And if it's acceptable to both parties, and by the way, this typically goes through several draft and revision cycles before it gets to the stage where everybody can sign, then we begin the formal negotiations for the project. And we'd come up with a tentative agreement, we don't know what the timeline is for this, that we will make available to everybody for public review and comment. So you'll see every step of this process as if you were participating in it yourself. Then we'll have a public meeting, and we'll vote on whether to execute that agreement. You have a chance to comment on that as well. Make your suggestions, tell us we're crazy, tell us we're not being aggressive enough, whatever you'd like. Everybody will have their chance to say. And then if we do reach the agreement with the Homes Association, then of course we're not going to drop a $2 million check on them. It's not going to work that way. Instead, the letter of intent will outline, among other things, the basic terms that we'd like to see, and those will include a variety of conditions that have to be satisfied before we're prepared to proceed. We currently envision, I'm going to defer to council on this, an agreement that gives us the rights to use the facility, and then a separate agreement that describes how we will provide some of the funding for the facility. So in the funding agreement, for instance, we wouldn't dole out the money up front. We would pay it based upon completed milestones, and we'll get to that in a minute. All right, so why are we using a letter of intent? It's to facilitate the start of the project by identifying the understandings that will form the basis of the final contracts. They are nice because they're brief. They take less time and effort to create. It doesn't cover all the bases, just enough the details to get everybody started. It spells out everybody's expectations early on. Usually they're non-binding, but it does demonstrate your commitment to the deal. They're very cost effective because they surface whatever issues the other side might have before you've invested all the money in drafting up the agreements. You get to know early on where the problems might lie and prepare for that, and maybe negotiate them away before you put pen to paper or fingers to keyboard. The other thing is that, as I said, in the spirit of transparency, a letter of intent will be available for you to see. It gives everybody public notice, and they get a look at the preliminary documentation of what we'd like to do. Right? So you'll be in on this all the way. Now, what are some of the issues that need to be addressed in this sort of an agreement? First of all, the use agreement would be structured along the lines of a commercial lease. We described the premises, and that would be based on the square footage that's shown in the current plans. Many of you may know that the permit for the plans that have been submitted has been appealed by one of the residents of the district. So we're not sure exactly whether the project will have to change, whether the square footages or configuration might change. But currently we're working off of the most recent version of the plans. We'd like a 60-year term. We'd like to pay $1 a year with no escalations, no pass-through of expenses or taxes or anything like that. So our costs are fixed, no surprises. In exchange for that, we would put up to $2 million into the project. Everybody would have their own obligations. We would have some, and the Homes Association would have some. For instance, especially with respect to maintenance and repair, we maintain the non-structural portions of our premises. The Homes Association would maintain and repair the building, the structural portions, all the public portions of the building, that sort of thing. Very customary. Before we disperse any funds for construction, we require an operating plan furnished to us by the Homes Association, showing us that for the next 10, 15 years or so, they have a reliable source of revenues that they can use to maintain the building and satisfy their obligations. They are working on that now. I've been told various drafts have been prepared. They've been consulting with outside experts. We won't proceed until we get one that satisfies us. Of course, we need the utilities, power, electricity, that sort of thing on an on-demand basis, especially because we might have to operate as a shelter 24/7. Some of the other key conditions is that we'd ask the Homes Association to hold us harmless if there are any problems here with respect to the building, since they're effectively going to be the landlord. Then we have some key conditions, as I mentioned, one of which is the operating plan that we have to have before anything happens. We want to see the Homes Association implement their resolution about people who don't live in Sleepy Hollow but within the district still having rights to use the facility at no charge, and to be able to join the Homes Association if they wish. Actually, no, they have the right to use the facility. They wouldn't become, they wouldn't be as if they were Sleepy Hollow residents. And we also, of course, need to know that the building, that the permit is going to survive the CEQA challenge. If the challenge is successful and the project is terminated or is radically revised, then we're back to square one. Some of the other key protections are the customary insurance and indemnification provisions in there, so that we can allocate the risk between ourselves and the Homes Association based upon what's right and what's fair. And of course, we look for special bankruptcy provisions that would give us a lien on the property that would be secured by the land and the personal property that the Homes Association has here, and that would get priority in the event of a bankruptcy by the Homes Association. Because you can see we're thinking of most of the worst case scenario possibilities, and we'll provide for those in the agreement. Our counsel is here today, and I can tell you this is not her first rodeo. She does this for a living and knows exactly what needs to happen in order to protect the fire protection district. Just continuing on with some more of the details on the construction loan agreement. Will be structured as a construction loan agreement. We disperse the money on a back-end loaded basis. So they could only withdraw funds that we make available to them at specific milestones that they've completed on the construction process, and only if the costs aren't exceeding the budget. Right? We're not going to pay for overages. We want them to employ a competitive bidding process. We want to have the right to veto the contractors or the subcontractors, any change orders. If to the extent prevailing wage laws and things apply, those are all going to have to be complied with. And hopefully those will form the touchstones of what we're going to propose to the Homes Association. They have their own counsel, and they have a committee, a subcommittee, I believe, of their directors who's prepared to engage in this process with us. Now, how long this might take is really a function of how close we get with the letter of intent. If we're on track with the letter of intent, this may fall into place fairly quickly. If we have disputes between us or misunderstandings, then we're going to be doing some butting of heads, negotiating, horse trading until we get to what we want. Or if we don't, no project. We won't participate. We're perfectly prepared to walk away if we don't get the protections that we want and the terms and conditions that we need. Okay, Rich? Anything else? Fred?
I'm happy.
Okay, so
When you say that the district will expect non-homeowner association members to have access to the facility, you mean that in case of an emergency or on a daily basis?
on a daily basis, to the extent that they're using the facility for fire protection district sponsored
Okay, all right.
activities.
So related to the fire.
In an emergency, let me repeat something we said in April. In an emergency, no one's checking anybody's membership cards. In fact, we're not even going to be limiting, if necessary, the facility to people from Sleepy Hollow. If there's a big fire in the Cascades in Fairfax and they call us and say, we need to put 50 people over there for the next 2 nights, guess what? It's a public building then, you can do it. All right? Now, we're not going to do that at our complete discretion. We need to get the emergency management authorization to do it. So, we're not just opening this up to the world. It's not going to be a homeless shelter, anything like that. It's going to be used for emergency purposes. Upon the activation of the facility by the emergency services personnel.
And I'm sorry, I have another question, sorry.
Go ahead.
And probably already addressed this in previous meetings I could not attend. I made my donation to the foundation, not to the homeowner associations. But in your presentation, you talked that you will be dealing with the homeowner association, so 2 parties. So the foundation will be represented by the homeowner association for the funding? So you'll be dealing with one entity on the other side?
Yes, I'm glad you mentioned that.
Okay.
We've been referring only to the homeowners association, the Homes Association, as a convenience because the Homes Association owns the property. But it's our understanding that the Homes Association and the Charitable Foundation have agreements between and among themselves about who's going to manage the project and how the funding that's been attracted by the Charitable Foundation will be transferred into the project, either via the Homes Association or through some other mechanism. So yes, we're expecting to deal with both of those entities, but just for shorthand purposes, we just refer to the Homes Association. Okay? All right, so now, yes, Evelyn.
Do the 3 of you intend to resign from the Homes Association in order to avoid the appearance of a conflict of interest in this negotiation?
No. Good. Okay, so now we've reached the public comment and question phase. Before we get started, just a reminder, 3 minutes each. I'm going to be the timer. I won't strictly enforce it, but if you go off into the weeds, we're going to gently steer you back onto the topic. Everybody gets 1 go-round before anyone gets a second opportunity. Okay? Connie Berto.
Okay. This is a sidebar bit of information about the boundaries of Sleepy Hollow, which go back to a Spanish land grant. And the boundaries of Sleepy Hollow are listed membership in the Homes Association is limited to members of this area, which is defined in the bylaws. Not only that, but the Articles of Incorporation filed with the state of California dating back to 1946. And it's very interesting. It has the rods, chains, degrees, minutes, seconds, and so forth. And it says, well, it's about 1,900 acres. So this is, the membership is non-transferable. And the people who live in the no man's land, the neither fish nor fowl, have had the option to deal with LAFCO, Local Agency Formation Commission, and petition San Anselmo to join their town. And their taxes go to the county like ours do, and there's a small amount that is allocated to the Sleepy Hollow Fire Protection District out of everybody's property taxes. So that's what I want to say. And as far as conflict of interest, I think that is way out on left field. You might as well say that the Board of Supervisors cannot vote on matters concerning Marin because they live in Marin. And I think that these gentlemen here are every bit as capable of dealing with the issues as anyone else.
Well said, well said.
Before we get to that, Chris, let me just say, since this has been raised twice, let me just tell you what we believe, and that is that we believe we don't have a conflict of interest because we're not going to be receiving any unique financial or other benefit that the rest of the people in the district won't be receiving. Right? So we're just another set of residents in the district without any unique benefit to this process. And we're completely transparent about it. You can go look up our Form 700s at the Civic Center to find out what our financial interests are. But we do not intend to resign. We do not agree that we have a conflict of interest.
Gentleman there.
Chris.
Yeah, just a couple comments. First of all, I won't address conflict of interest because I think it's been very well addressed. In fact, if we applied conflict of interest to everybody in this room, all of us are probably members of the Home Association and taxpayers to the fire district, so we'd all have a conflict of interest. So I think that's been adequately addressed. But I do want to talk about what I think is the community of interest here. It's kind of the flip side of conflict of interest. I'm very happy to see that the fire district is setting out on a course of arm's length negotiations with the Home Association, and vice versa. That the Home Association is going to have arm's length negotiations with the fire district. That's the proof in the pudding in terms of the genuineness of what you do. I do want to say, though, that when this project first was announced, I had a good deal of skepticism about how the project would relate to the fire district's primary role and goals and strategy. And I think what we've seen today, as well as in the last few months, is that the fire district has done its homework. It's done a lot of due diligence. You're seeing a lot of the results here. I've read most of the materials on the website. There's a tremendous amount of information that shows very objective, factual analysis of the benefits. I also appreciate that the fire district is not making any decisions today. They are going through a deliberative process, and they still have the option, if things don't work out with the Home Association, to back away from the project. That's what, in my opinion, as a taxpayer of the fire district, that the fire district should do to achieve its fiduciary duty to its taxpayers and its property owners. I just want to commend you. I don't know where you will come out ultimately. I think there's still questions. I think several people here have raised questions about your analysis, and I'm very confident you'll address those questions. But as far as I'm concerned, you've come a long way. My skepticism that I had originally about throwing $2 million into a clubhouse project, it's not a clubhouse anymore. It's a community center, as I think the fire district envisions it. It's a center that will have a very strong primary role in disaster preparedness and fire protection for the community. And if you achieve those goals, in my opinion, it's a very good project to move forward. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris. Evelyn.
Okay. My name is Evelyn Messenger. I live in the Fire Protection District. I would like to make a statement, and it includes a question. I met with Director Shortall last month, and he gave me this document which includes the Isabel Cook Community Center in San Anselmo, And his point was that the taxpayers of San Anselmo have funded this community center, but they still have to pay for the amenities if they want to use it, if they want to rent a room in it. It's a good point. But San Anselmo taxpayers can vote. They can run for office in San Anselmo, and they can speak at town meetings. Now, in Sleepy Hollow, as was pointed out earlier, I live in the fire protection district outside the boundaries of Sleepy Hollow itself. And as we discussed earlier, let me find it. There's been a resolution, and in short, the access to the community center will be available to any resident at the same rate for all, that includes me or anyone here, solely in regards to community center access fees. So, and as Connie Berto pointed out, those of us, the 45 homes by my count, who are outside the boundaries of Sleepy Hollow, are not allowed to be in Sleepy Hollow. Now, what does this mean? Unlike the residents of San Anselmo, I can't vote, I can't serve on the board, and in fact, I can't speak at meetings of the Homeowners Association. I am not allowed to speak at meetings. Nonetheless, my taxpayer dollars are going to be contributed here, and I am going to have access, but I'm not going to have, this is an issue of democracy. I am not going to be able to be represented in decisions made about the taxpayer-funded private clubhouse in the future. So it turns out, okay, I did some math, there's 835 homes in the fire protection district. 345 of those homes are currently members of the Homeowners Association, which leaves 390 homes that are not members. So 345 out of 835, clearly this is not a majority. And yet, let's call the 345 homes the first-class homes. They are not only within the borders of the district, but they're able to vote on future allocations to the clubhouse, whether they might decide to put a restaurant in one of the sleeping rooms or, a disco, I don't know. So anyway, whatever, that doesn't include me. The 390 homes, even though they live within the borders of Sleepy Hollow, they are required to pay to belong to a private organization in order to have a vote, to have a voice, and to serve on the board that will control this building. Now, the other 45 homes, of which I am one, I can pay to join the association, but as far as I don't know the rules, because I'm not allowed to see them, because I'm not a member, but it appears that there is, under no circumstances, will these 45 taxpayers who are contributing to a taxpayer-funded private clubhouse be able to vote on what happens in the future, be able to serve on the board, or be able to even speak at the meetings of the Homeowners Association.
What's your question?
I'm getting there. Mike, I know, but please,
Let's all be respectful.
Thank you
Go
very
ahead,
much.
please,
Thank you.
please continue.
I'm allowed an opinion, and I do live in a place where I'm not allowed to speak at the Homeowners Association. I believe I'm allowed to speak here. Okay, so my question is to all of you, but particularly to Director Shortall, because when we spoke a month ago, you told me that the terms for those of us who live outside the boundaries would have to meet your satisfaction in order for you to disperse funds. So, as I see it, and I think as most of the people in my neighborhood see it, this is a case of discrimination against a class of taxpayers. And I wonder if if this meets your terms of, that it would meet your satisfaction, that we will not be allowed to vote or to speak or to serve. Would it meet your satisfaction?
We have not worked out all the details of the agreement. I think a huge step and a huge policy statement was taken by the homeowners association on Thursday night. Right now, you have, as you point out, there's no tax money invested in this. You have no rights to come to the facility. You can't be a member of the board. You're not in Sleepy Hollow. If this deal is done, you're going to get a number of benefits that you don't enjoy today. You will get to use the facility, which you can't now. You will get to take advantage of all the public safety components of it. You will get the right to use any amenity here at the same expense and whatnot as anybody else was here. That's a huge benefit that you don't enjoy today. So you're going to be going not only getting public safety benefit, you're going to get other benefit too. Whether or what your voice may or may not be in terms of the facility itself going forward, I think is to be determined. So that's why we're going to have negotiations. I think we've come a long way in addressing your concerns. I think we will continue to work on that. I think big steps have been taken. And I think that the people in your community, of whom I know that quite a few are actually in favor of doing this, are getting a benefit that they don't have today that is substantial.
Well, we're getting a reduction in our fee. We can join now, but at a certain fee, and we're not allowed to join the homeowners association. As I understand it, we will still not be allowed to join the homeowners association. We will not be allowed to vote. We will not be allowed to speak at public meetings, and we will not be allowed to serve on the board of the organization when it makes a determination about spending money on the taxpayer-funded private clubhouse.
Thank you.
I'd like to say something. Go ahead.
Yes.
How your group, your 40 homes, it was then 30 homes, ended up getting fire protection. We made a terrible mistake. What we should have told your 30 homeowners then is annex to San Anselmo. You live in San Anselmo, you just don't choose to pay San Anselmo taxes. You don't have third-acre lots. You're not you're just next to Sleepy Hollow, but you're really San Anselmo. And what you're telling us again is, no, we don't want to join San Anselmo. We don't want to pay their tax. We want to get this stuff from you, and we want to complain. Thank you.
Excuse me, I have paid taxes to your organization.
Yeah, I know,
For
and
20
it was a
years, and
mistake.
in my 1 acre lot, the taxes are quite high.
Okay, thank you very much for your comment. Let me just say two things. I disagree with the premise of the question you posed to Rich, that this is discriminatory in some way and that you're somehow disenfranchised living where you live. You chose to live where you live, right? You chose not to live in Sleepy Hollow for whatever reason, and the consequences of that choice are
I didn't choose
are
to
among
pay
these.
the taxes.
But you
Please.
did say you,
I
in this
didn't
theme,
choose it.
the theme that you are disenfranchised, you have every right to vote for members of the board of the Sleepy Hollow Fire Protection District. You have every right to speak to the Sleepy Hollow Fire Protection District meetings. And you've spent quite a lot of time speaking to us. In fact, well, I'll just leave it at that.
Well, and I appreciate your willingness to listen to me, and I appreciate the work that you do. I do feel that this is a serious problem of discrimination of a class of taxpayers. And I'm sorry, I'm not choosing to build this building, and so, and I obviously have very little say. I can say what I can say to you, and I'm saying it, and it, you know, in all good feeling to the work you do.
Thank you.
Tom, one remark.
Yes.
As the board is mentioned a lot of times, sorry, my name is Pim Brouwer, I'm a board member. You are always welcome in board meetings, and you can perfectly, you're always welcome in board meetings, as it's an overall rule, and we can perfectly invite visitors. So if you let us know you wanna join a meeting, and you can perfectly.
But I can't serve on the board.
You cannot serve on the board, but we even give you the opportunity to express your opinion on the board.
I've been
All
told
those
that I
things.
can't express my opinion, and I can't have anything to do with any votes. Is that true?
Votes, yes, correct.
Yes, I
Correct.
can't vote, and I can't serve on the board.
You can't serve on the
And I
board.
have to be invited to speak. I'm not, because I'm not.
And the inviting to speak is a very easy process. So let us know, and you're part of the board.
Good, thank you, I will.
And as a personal remark, you know, I'm a permanent resident, coming from the lowlands of the Netherlands. I pay a lot of taxes, I can't vote at all. You know what? Those are the situations.
John.
John Hanley, a couple points. It won't be a disco because it's against the use permit. It won't be a restaurant because it's against the use permit. And there was a lot of things as Americans we can do, and I don't think serving on the Sleepy Hollow board, whatever you call it, is right up there with teaching kids to read and helping others out in our communities. So I mean, there's a lot of problems in our country. This isn't a 10 on a 10. If I think we will live happy lives if some of us are not able to serve on a board. I've lived here many years. Hopefully, no offense, I will never have to go to a board meeting. So thank you.
Questions, statements, comments? Gerald, please? No, Connie, you've already had your first go round.
Comment on this.
Pardon me?
Well, it's a point of information
She has a
about
bylaw.
serving
You
on
want to
the
yield?
board.
All right, please, Connie, go ahead.
Okay, Article 6, officers and directors, these are the Sleepy Hollow bylaws. Qualifications, all officers and directors shall have their principal domicile in Sleepy Hollow, period. So,
Can I
I'm
just?
sorry, but you had your chance to annex.
I just live here.
Yeah, just, Rich is right. Well, this isn't a debating society. We're happy to answer questions if we can, but please stay on the topic. As we said at the April 6th meeting, this is not a meeting of the Homes Association. This is not a meeting of the Board of Supervisors. This is not a meeting of the Planning Commission. This is not a meeting of the Sanitary District. If you have concerns that pertain to those agencies, please take them to them. All right? Thank you. Please. Next. Corey.
My name is Corin Gruff, and I live at 22 Van River Court, and I have 2 small children, and I am for this project, the disaster recovery project, because not only in the case of an emergency, like a fire or a flood or a earthquake or a power outage, will there be medicine and electricity and cots that might be needed, but more importantly, that it's a gathering place where we can help each other and check in with each other and find out who else might need help. And during a disaster, communication is really important, I think, and I think it's wonderful that we have the opportunity for this project as a community if we want it. Thank you.
Again, I'm Bob Wilson. I live at 28 Dutch Valley Lane, and I've lived here since 1984. And I've belonged to the Homeowners Association the whole time that I've lived here. I have to admit, I've taken a kind of a back seat in Sleepy Hollow over the years and never got involved in the community affairs to a great degree because it was always handled so efficiently by the board of directors and the people who contributed their time to the Hollow. But I've watched what's going on over the years, and in my opinion, this project, this concept, is one of the best things I've ever seen to benefit the Hollow, not only the Hollow, but the entire community. Disaster area where people can be trained and become aware of problems that exist, equipped to handle emergencies, I think is an absolute godsend. And I want to go on record as supporting it wholeheartedly.
Thank you. John.
Thank you. I'm John Simmons, live at 65 Stuyvesant Drive, and I've lived in the Hollow now for 38 years. And I just want to make a comment, and that is what has transpired over the many months from the conception of a new fire emergency facility has been such a model for local democracy. I have never experienced such transparency as the fire district has tried to make available to all of us. Someone said that they felt it was I'm paraphrasing now, undemocratic process. Democracy, by definition, is that the minority agrees to be oppressed by the majority. So I would suggest that rather than lament the fact that you're not a member of the Homes Association and seemingly trying to sabotage what I think is a noble effort by the board and the fire district to make the community more cohesive, to make it more of a sense of community, that you may want to consider going back to your unincorporated area and trying to organize that district and maybe hold a plebiscite and let majority rule in that fire district that is not part of the Homes Association. I think your time would be better spent among that group of citizens that you are a part of. So what I want to just say in closing is that I'm proud of this board. And Frank, I could not agree with you more. Three gentlemen who have basically given up their lives over the last 7 years trying to facilitate a project that would benefit the entire community, I think is nobility beyond words. So I thank you all very, very much.
I can't see you. Oh, there you are. Sorry.
Hi, my name is Marlene Knox, and today, I've lived in Sleepy Hollow today, as of today, 40 years. I moved here 40 years ago today. And I have to say, I haven't done a darn thing. I've never served on the board. I've never voted. I donated my husband to the cause just recently. But I don't know why anyone would want to do that, quite frankly. But I enjoy the privileges of living in this community, and for the life of me, I cannot understand why anyone would be against such an enhancement to our community. This place has been a sore spot for a long time. A new community center would benefit everyone in the community, and the fact that it's going to be used as a shelter in an emergency only makes it even better. So for those of you who are opposed, for the life of me, I cannot understand why it's to the benefit of all of us. And thank you for your work. All
Yeah. Before we move on, let me just announce, we've reached the 12 o'clock hour, which was our planned time slot, 10 to 12. Steve Knox, are you still here?
Yeah.
Is there an event scheduled this afternoon?
We're good.
We're good, okay. Well, then let's continue. Following the same process, everybody gets to speak once before you get your second bite at the apple. Bob Lasser, please.
My name is Bob Lesser. I've lived here in the Hollow for 24 years, and I'm one of the neighbors. So I have an inherent bias against the scope of the project. I'm entirely in favor of a clubhouse that has a very small portion of it dedicated to a disaster preparedness arrangement. I am very much against the height of the building, the size and the scope of the building. This room is 17 feet tall. What is being proposed is an atrium living room, basically, that is 27 feet tall, which has no functional purpose, no assistance for any kind of disaster preparedness. The floor space would obviously be used. But to be a neighbor and to think that I'm going to have this blight on my house and my backyard because someone must have a 27-foot atrium living room seems unnecessary and certainly has nothing to do with disaster preparedness. I also question the bocce ball court, the fire pit, the coffee bar, and the 27-foot tower which has no other purpose than, except for the bottom of it, to be an ornamental feature. So I would hope that your board does give money to help rebuild this building, rebuild it or build a new building. The one that is really, truly a disaster center, and not a 27-foot tall atrium living room with a bocce ball court, fire pit, and ornamental tower. I mean, let's face it, folks, let's not mess with the word. They're talking about building a fancy clubhouse. 8% would be used for disaster preparedness. 564 feet of 6,100 feet would be for disaster relief. I don't want to see a giant building overlooking my backyard. It's not necessary. Why are they doing it? It's purely ornamental. I'm sure I'd enjoy coming in and say, oh, this is really magnificent, but it's really superfluous and an exaggeration of what's being called for.
I'd like to suggest that you bring this kind of complaint to the Homes Association.
I did.
Because I agree with you, and yet should the three of us override what apparently the Homes Association has developed as a gold-plated thing that I strongly disagree with, and the fact that we're paying for 80% of it is
Well, don't
bothersome.
so much money. How to build something that's on scale and it really serves your purposes. You don't need to give them $2 million. It won't be 27 feet tall. The living room won't be almost half again as tall as this room. Give enough money to build a real disaster preparedness, and also has.
You shouldn't be landing on us. You should be landing on the Homes
Well, I'm
Association.
letting that new product to give them. Now let's get. I have one other point. Is it possible to bring up your financial calculations?
Bob, can I just say,
Yeah.
we're not giving anybody anything.
Okay, well, you're
We are
budgeting.
getting-
You're
we are-
budgeting.
Right, and also, we're getting, in exchange for that, a 60-year right to use the building.
Well, you
So
get that anyway.
we-
$1 million donation.
But you know what?
$1 million contribution.
But you know what? All we want to do is secure our public safety functions in the building. It's not our perquisite to weigh in on the design, all right? So
If you told them we're not going to give you $2 million, we change their mind, we'll give you $1 million, you know that.
then we'll be renegotiating our lease 30 years from now. I don't want to do that.
It would still be maintained, the scale would be low, it would be less, and the neighbors would be happy, you'd be happy. They might not be so happy because they wouldn't have their 27-foot atrium living room. But let's not mince words about what this really is. This is, you guys are building an elaborate, excessive clubhouse.
Thank you. Yes?
Yes, I want to say that, well, my name is Teresa Martin, and I live on Oak Crest Road, and I'm one of the 45 homes that is not a part of the Sleepy Hollow Homes Association. And I support what Evelyn said about not getting a right to vote on the Sleepy Hollow Clubhouse project as a member of Sleepy Hollow Association. I do agree that as a community partnership, that the load or the budget for this building should be shared more equally. I think that it's way extravagant to spend put 80% of this building into the mix for fire protection and for the uses of the fire protection district. I think that the building is going to be used primarily for recreation, and so the folks who have the benefit of that recreation should be paying the bulk of the cost of that building. Thank you.
Carol?
The Homeowners Association and the Charitable Foundation can do just exactly as they like with private donation and membership dues. For me, the issue is, and always has been, the improper use of tax dollars that were allocated for fire and emergency services. Our taxes have been paid, the money is in place, and the designated use is fire and emergency services. Let me relate one example of why I'm concerned about this letter of intent process. The fire district's August 15, 2013 minutes show $2 million budgeted for the clubhouse project. Director Shorthall favored spending $75,000 on plan development. $25,000 was authorized lest a public bid process be triggered. In September, Director Finn emailed John Grubb to call when he was ready to proceed. The November 27, 2013 minutes give retroactive board approval to the $25,000 payment and accompanying agreement executed approximately 7 weeks before. This agreement terminated December 31st, 2013, presumably with the money being spent, bringing the total district funds on the clubhouse to over $81,000 by the end of December 2013. However, the August and November minutes did not appear on the district website until approximately 7 months later in July 2014, along with a sample agreement substantially similar to the actual document signed by the district and the Charitable Foundation 9 months earlier. That does not seem transparent to me. When you negotiated a similar agreement and payment to John Hanley's, or excuse me, the Youth to Work program, you handled it quite differently. The project has a deadly flaw. There is no definition. Each person can freely imagine what the result will be and structure it to be just exactly what he or she wants. And in fact, the 4 players, the district, the homeowners, the Charitable Foundation, and the county are describing 4 different projects. This is deceptive. The $2 million is not free money. It is taxes paid in good faith that the expected services will be provided. It is ironic that after so many years of saving for a firehouse, now that we no longer need a firehouse, you appear more focused on a building than on the services that are your statutory purpose. What you have described as the projects of which you are proud, and I agree and endorse, are needed and appropriate. I'm not going to list them because I'm over my time, but none of them need a building. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Linda Fowler. I live at 140 Legend Road, and I've lived in the neighborhood for 16 years. I have very fond memories of this building and area. My daughter was on the swim team. I served on the board. And I remember when I served on the board, Holly was president, and she got a report on the clubhouse and how rodent infested it was. And we all kind of gasped, and I thought, this is horrible. How are we going to be able to raise the money to be able to do this? So when we heard about the Fire Protection Board money and partnering with us, I thought it was brilliant. And I was so delighted that we could save our clubhouse and convert it into a community center and emergency shelter to be able to have both uses and to continue this wonderful place for the community. And I'm hoping my daughter will want to stay in the neighborhood and her kids can come here and have fond memories of swim team and all of the parties and things that happen here with its dual purpose, or multi-purpose, I should say. So I thank you so much for your work, and I strongly support the project.
Thank you.
Sure. Thank you. I'm Bruce Baum, 1165 Butterfield Road, and I'm only a 32-year resident of the Hollow. And I ask that my comments be included in the public record. First of all, thank you for responding to a lot of questions that we had, a lot of questions that were specifically in my comment letter. I do appreciate that. I believe it's a breach of fiduciary duty that this board has not hired an independent public financing advisory firm or a certified independent public finance advisor to analyze the best and the highest use options for our reserves. A lot of my comments have been addressed, and I'm just going to jump through this thing. The district has posted on the website a document that Tom referred to, called Summary Analysis of Emergency Center Financial Value. It's disingenuous to use data supplied by, quote, real estate professionals, unquote, in lieu of a bona fide, independent, public financing advisory firm. Why would you present unsubstantiated data from an anonymous, no longer anonymous, possibly biased source? Many assumptions are conjecture, erroneous, and inapplicable for this proposal. Clearly, there are better uses for our money for fire protection and safety than funding the so-called, quote, project, close quote, including, but not limited to, better egress from the valley in an emergency, staffing Fire Station 20 with a paramedic on the third shift. While I agree that there's a need to upgrade Mira, I'm concerned about the backup plans that Mira has. Zayo Fiber is for a backup plan for communications with our JPA members and the Emergency Operations Center. I'm recommending that you hire a communications consultant to recommend a backup communications plan, not solely relying on Mira's backup plan of using cellular and mobile devices. Look no further than lessons learned after 9/11, Hurricanes Katrina, Sandy, and other disasters. We can't rely on mobile in Sleepy Hollow. We have very limited communications for long periods. This is an unacceptable plan. Director Shortall, while having strong credentials, is our Mira rep and is vested in getting the $29 per property Mira bond approved. His comments about Mira backup should be questioned. We need an objective analysis of the highest and best use option of our ratepayers' reserves. It's the board's fiduciary responsibility to send out a request for proposal to get at least 3 bids from independent public financial advisory firms. In closing, I trust the board will rely on the merits of comments relative to fire protection and safety, non-factual comments extolling the purely social functions of the project, while personally gratifying to the directors, do not address the statutory purpose of the district and are irrelevant. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? So second time around now. John Grubb. No, John?
I just wanted to, so I'm John Grubb, live on Van Ripper, and then the chair of the Sleepy Hollow Charitable Foundation, past president of the Homes Association. And we have raised contributions now from approximately 250 families, which qualifies as, according to the U.S. Census, about 900 residents of Sleepy Hollow in their households. And all of us are in support of this project, in support of making our residents safer. And not doing this is the converse, it will be less safe. And so we thank you for your work and urge you to move forward.
First comment, Dave Beach, 19 Mather, been here a while. I'm a member of the Home Association. When this project was first proposed, I was a little bit skeptical about the scope. Very early on in the project, the concept of community disaster preparedness was integrated into the scope of the project. The development of that involvement has been executed exceptionally. I was one of the early donors to the Homeowners Association Foundation because of the community emergency preparedness piece. And so myself and my wife support what the fire board and the direction that the fire board, well, number one, thank the fire board for all the work they put into this unbelievable amount of work. And we support the direction that they're heading 100% in terms of supporting the renovation project. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks.
Yeah, hi. My name is Luke Argilla, and I've lived in the community about 35 years. And I remember the first Saturday after we moved into our home, March or April or May, woke up and there were cars coming up around our house all over the neighborhood, and kids getting out of their cars wearing these cute little swimsuits, and guns going off and loud noises and kids yelling, and you could hear swimmers to your marks and all that sort of thing. And I had no idea that I didn't even know this community facility was here. I certainly didn't know that there was a swim team. And you could describe that as a nuisance, as a problem, as something that we didn't buy into, but it's part of our community. The swim team, this facility, we ended up being involved in that program for 16 years. It's one of the best things our family ever did. But we live 2 houses away from here. And there's a little bit of a nuisance involved. You could describe it as a nuisance. But even today, even this past swim season, when I look out my door and see those cars pulling up and parking in front of my house and around the block and up the street, it just warms my heart. Absolutely warms my heart. I love it. And so, you know, for those of us who may be close by, you gotta put up with that kind of thing. It's just part of living in the community, and it happens to people all over the place. So, enough said about that. This is a home run. It's an absolute home run. And the due diligence that these 3 guys have done is remarkable, absolutely remarkable. And we can nitpick about coffee bars and that sort of thing, and we can talk about, some of us can talk about discrimination. That's a big, big word to use in a context like this, as far as I'm concerned. But this is a project that will benefit this community and those surrounding this community in just a phenomenal way. And in terms of the details of the arrangement and the contracts and the leases and all of that, I think it's going to be a very tough road to hoe. But it's not a one-sided negotiation, it's a 2-sided negotiation. And so scaling this back down to a $1 million project, I don't think the Homes Association would have any part of it. It's not going to work for them. So, you know, there's a lot of work to be done yet, a lot of details to be negotiated, and I think the association is going to negotiate in their best interest, the board will negotiate in their best interest, and hopefully there'll be a meeting of the minds and it's going to work for everybody.
Thank you. Okay, round 2, Connie Bertel.
I'd like to clarify something that Frank, my husband, said about opposing the project. We don't oppose the rebuilding of this clubhouse. I don't think anyone opposes the rebuilding. What he and I personally feel is that the interior architectural plan is flawed, is poor, as a matter of fact. I mean, a lot of duplicative things, coffee bar, fitness center, libraries. Come on, we have those outside and very good ones too. But this is not the place to argue the design. The community, well, the county planning department is the place, and the commission meeting, the planning commission meeting is the place to make those comments. And he and I intend to do that as a personal level, on a personal level. But as far as the rebuilding goes, it needs to be done. Tower or no tower, and I hope there's no tower.
Is somebody else there?
Yeah, I've been sitting here for quite a while. My name is Dave Grubb. I've had a little bit to do with the Homes Association before. I moved here, was trying to figure that out. Everybody's so proud of it. We live at 33 Van Ripper. We lived in another house here too. And we started in, I think it was over 40 years ago. So we've been in this community for 40 years. I, like Luke, like the swim team. Our kids got into it. Greatest thing going. I think what you're building here now is not only a fire protection district, disaster area, but you're building a community center. And I happened to grow up in one where we had volunteer fire department. They met at this community center. Boy Scouts, Cub Scouts, Girl Scouts, they all met there. It was a great place. It was back in West Virginia. And I think that the community as a whole, and it became their disaster area, because at the time I remember, unfortunately, was the Second World War. We had those funny sirens going on all the time. Everybody went to the disaster center as soon as you could.
I also lived here when we had a disaster. We had a big flood.
Yeah.
You couldn't get into this place. It was the river, or this creek down by,
Green Valley.
not Green Valley, it's on down, further down is a real problem. But it was 3 feet high over the road. I personally had to go up over the hill over here and walk in to get to the house and help the family get through the flood. That's a disaster. And if you have a place like this you can go to, at least you have some comfort and you have the place to do it. And I disagree. I think you should have a larger space. You should have more community, and so forth, and all the stuff that you need for disaster. Because this place is something that could happen. A disaster can happen here because the fire person was talking about, the ridge line. You ever been on a ridge line when fire comes? I was, in this area. And the very houses you guys were talking about are not in part of the Homes Association. Because, and I never forget, what do you take when a fire comes? This person took her pan. I'm thinking about all the things that you want to get out of a house. And it's not a pan, I'll tell you that. Anyway, I think the project is good. I think you guys have done a hell of a good job. You've negotiated well. I think you'll continue to negotiate well. And I don't have any problem with the whole thing. I think it should be bigger.
Thank you. John.
Just some clarification. It was said that the new building would be a blight, I believe was the word, to their ambiance or whatever. I think that's a bit of an overstretch to say that the new building would be a blight, number one. Number two, as far as the unneeded space, because it's really not an emergency shelter, but it's a privileged section of the community, presumably affluent, although that would be false, to include all of us Homes Association members as being affluent. I would say it's more accurately defined as someone who wants to participate in the community as opposed to choose to isolate themselves from the community. Regarding the space is for, in the event of an emergency, the floods that we had that Mr. Grubb just described, to be able to congregate and to shelter in. The fact that it may serve a dual purpose doesn't negate that fact. Now, personally speaking, this clubhouse, this facility, emergency or not, has never, in the 38, 37 years that I've lived here, been a community focus. It's been a rather unattractive building that happens to be on Butterfield, that gets used for the swim team, nursery school, whatever. But it really did not serve the community at large. The whole concept of coming up with a new building, a new facility, is to primarily act as a shelter for the community in the event of a crisis. But it could also serve a purpose of coalescing the community. So instead of having 390 homes within the Hollow boundaries that are not members of the Homes Association, perhaps this might invite some incentive for them to participate more in the community, which is, after all, what we all want. So I just wanted to get some clarification of that. Regarding the height, it's all within the building codes of the Hollow. You can go right across the street there, and I don't know what that height is of that two-story structure across the street. But there are two-story structures everywhere. So the fact that you happen to live next door, how is that different than someone on the other side of you decides to remodel their home and add a second floor for expanding their family? So I think, again, rather than being naysayers and trying to pick apart every little, word and every, intent, as if this board has some malfeasance in wanting to upset the community. Can we just not kind of look at this thing positively and just see how the entire community benefits? And even those outside the Sleepy Hollow boundaries are going to benefit immensely. They will, I believe, be invited to participate in the facilities of the new emergency shelter. Now, whether they choose to or not is up to them. So, if in fact it is a democracy, then let's have a vote and let majority rule. Thank you very much.
You've raised a lot of good points. And when we started this, I really thought, oh, we'll just have a little community agreement here and we'll come up with a project, everything will be fine. But that's not what's happened. And I don't think we're there yet. As I said, I think we have 4 different projects, and I think there's pretty substantial disagreement about which project we should be doing and how much of it. I would like to go through just a little bit of what has been presented as the budget and to recommend to you that there's a problem here. It has been stated that the soft costs would be 25 to 35% of the 2.5 million. And in those soft costs are furniture and equipment, disaster recovery supplies, construction permit fees, utility hookup fees, architect and engineer fees, project contingency fees, theoretically legal fees. That doesn't leave a very well-supplied community emergency center.
Can I interrupt just for a second?
Yeah.
I don't know what document that is. It didn't come from us.
That's the Charitable Foundation's
Then-
breakdown of the project.
Then you might want to talk to them about that. That's not our document. I haven't
Okay,
examined it.
one of the things in your documents that I think it would be good to clear up is, this was April 6th, emergency features. You stated that the dormitory, this would be a dormitory area for firefighters. So are we having residents or are we having a dormitory for firefighters? Mr. Grubb has raised a very good point. Access can be a problem. I know ranges, I know community centers, and I remember the World War II sirens. It was good to have a place where you could get someplace where you felt safe. I'm not sure this is it. And I think you need to be sure that when you're talking about the whole area, people are going to be able to get here and are going to benefit from it. Because the programs that you have invested in, which is for example, the national specialized training, that doesn't take place here. Your donations to the national and firefighting things, they're not here. The chipper, the TAM, the Y2W, the vegetative crews, the roads, the fire flow, the schools and churches, like the Presbyterian Church said, well, we'd love to be some help you in a fire or in some type of emergency, but we'd like to talk about working on that. I don't think anything was ever done with funds for that. I think it would be an alternative site. Just let me keep going here, Frank, I'll use it. The newsletter, the website, CAL FIRE Fund, fire flow loans, the manual, all of the informational things that you're talking about, those don't take building. Now the JPA expenses, we do pay for the Ross Valley Paramedic and Fire Districts. So our money, some portion of our money, is actually going into the JPA services. Those don't take the building. And yet we're required to pay them and our money is being used for it. So I ask that you consider all these things and think about whether 80% is really appropriate. Because there's a lot of other things, and I haven't gone into the equipment. The equipment that comes in here, the paramedics, the fire trucks, that's the JPA. But if there's need for a new one, they ask for funds, and you authorize them funds. The funds come from us. Well, that's equipment that serves us. That's a public benefit that serves us. And if we went through proportionally and we broke out the JPA benefits, okay, who has more paramedic costs? Has that been done? Are we getting a fair return for that? Or do we need to put more money in that or even less? I know you allocated proportionally. I've seen the breakdowns and when Ross came in and yeah, I saw that. But these things need to be considered, not just a set. At the Sleepy Hollow homeowners, it was up to $2 million. But you are saying, bang, $2 million, $2 million, $2 million, $2 million. Could we please go back to up to $2 million and really look at it and make sure that's appropriate? Because there are other things on which we could be spending that money.
So it's not a dormitory, okay? Rich, maybe I should just stop.
I appreciate the comments.
Yeah, really what it comes down to is, it's a, look, it comes down to a policy dispute. If you don't like what we're proposing to do, then ultimately you have a recourse. You run for the fire board, and you get on a fire board, and you pursue the project you want to pursue. All right, next person. Bruce.
Yeah, one last question. You mentioned that the fire district is going to have an office here and they'll have some place to go. Does that mean it's going to be staffed 5 days?
No.
So how do we get, I kind of missed something there where we come here to get information anytime it's always going to be available to us.
This is where we store our files. Now they're in my bedroom.
I get the file part, but we don't get questions answered if nobody's here, is my point.
Well,
Telephone.
yeah, you can contact us and arrange to meet, and we'll arrange to meet with you here. Or we'll put materials out in where you can get them if it's something like that. Think of it like a professor's office hours at a university. Okay, that's probably more accurate.
Thanks.
We'll be there from time to time, but no, we're not going to staff the office. We have other things to do in our office. Sorry. Bob?
Does the fire district plan on training programs that would benefit the community? For instance, CPR or what to do if someone has a heart attack, that kind of thing. Would those sessions be held in the new facility?
Yes, that and many more. And
I think that's a good thing for the whole community. Let's do it.
Down
Bob?
My point about bringing up a 27-foot atrium living room is, I support the idea of a new building here that suits your purposes and encompasses many things. My question to you, I guess, is it even conceivable, is it possible for you guys to say, there are some people in the community, a minority, who think this project as it's designed is extravagant? Towers, bocce ball courts, 27-foot ceiling, it's superfluous to the fire district's purposes and needs. And we've decided, well, we're not going to give you $2 million. But I wonder where $2 million came from. Why did you offer $3 million? But that's a separate story. And so we've changed our mind. It's too extravagant. We'll give you $1 million, and you'll have to scale down your some people consider it superfluous aspects of the program, the project. And yet we still want for $1 million the same stuff, which is not very much. 560 feet of storage office space is not extravagant. And I think could be met in a scaled down version of a very attractive and useful center.
Thank you. Any other questions? All right, seeing none, I'm going to make a resolution that the district authorize its council to begin work on a draft of a letter of intent to be presented to the Homes Association. That includes, among other things, terms such as the description of the premises, the term of the arrangements, the amount of rent or other payments that might be due, maintenance, repair, and service obligations, key conditions, and other protections. And this is with respect to the use agreement. And then with respect to the funding agreement, that provisions be made for the disbursement of funds on a back-end loaded milestones type basis, giving the district the liberty to withdraw from the project if the milestones aren't met or if costs are excessive, and that, among other things, that the Homes Association apply a competitive bidding process to the entire project. And I'd ask if we could have council prepare such a letter at the earliest possible convenience for presentation to the board for review and comment, and then once approved for presentation to the Homes Association, the ball will then be in their court to comment on it and to see where we stand in terms of our respective expectations.
I will second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Passed unanimously. With that, I think we can declare the meeting adjourned. Thank you very much.
Chipper Day, new website, check it all out.